Good morning, commissioners. Welcome back. I hope you all had a great evening. Dr. Sandoval, thank you for joining us. It's great to have you. And Scott Kerby, director of our state special schools. Welcome.
Thank you. Excuse me.
All right. Well, we are starting our second day. We had a great day yesterday. I just am so appreciative of the enthusiasm, the engagement, your embracing of some of our new components like our O&P committee, our Ledge committee, our policy committee. Thank you for the leadership structure that helped make those a successful opportunity for commissioners and the public to engage in. That was just great work, and really appreciate the time and energy. So we're going to jump right in. Matt, do you want to call roll?
Michelle Andrews.
Here.
Mildred Brown.
Here.
Summer Harding. Havania Hayes White.
Here.
Sarah Jocham. Christina Mills. Gloria Perez Stewart. Gina Plate. Kayla Rodriguez. Kimberly Salmonson.
Here.
Barbara Schulman.
Here.
Janine Topalian.
Here.
David Toston. Here. Steve Winlock.
Present.
Leanne Liebus. We have a quorum.
Thank you, Matt. All right, Barbara, would you like to lead us in the flag salute?
I would.
Great, thank you.
Like we do in school, everybody please rise, right hand over your heart, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you, Barbara. All right, so a few follow-up items from yesterday. You will be receiving very shortly your survey to make your selection for or provide your input on what we should be doing in October and November, given the discussion about our transition conference. So that'll be coming. Thanks for your patience. And then let's see, why don't we go ahead and start with the mental health subcommittee report out. Mildred, thanks for your flexibility in doing that today. So I'll hand it over to you to give us a description of the discussion you guys had in your subcommittee yesterday.
Okay. We had two, Kimberly and Michelle. So if you want to add on, please do. We talked about the MHSA bill, SB 1019. It's a sponsored bill by the mental health system of care. Monitors, it's a recommendation for an expanded grant program. It'll be a funding source for high-level mental health collaboration. And so far it's made it through appropriations. And we'll talk about it the next time we meet. We also talked about the school and mental health grant, that there were 4 counties that received the award. 17 counties applied. The 4 counties that received the grant is Humboldt, Placer County, Tulare, and San Bernardino County. And the reason that they were awarded the grant is that one of the highest criteria was that they had to have an existing infrastructure. So apparently, though, there was some reduction in the amount of the grant based on the budget. And so all 4 counties needed to go back and resubmit their budgets based on the reduction. There is, and hopefully Christian will share information in her report, but we talked about a high needs group in terms of students who have intensive behaviors. And I did check with Christian, who attended on behalf of CDE, And there were some big stakeholders there who are all concerned about students who have intense behaviors. This is kind of piggybacks on the work that Seneca convened last March as far as they're concerned. So what we thought is that it was great that everyone's talking about this group of students where there's such difficulty as far as placement. That got us into talking about the therapeutic foster care as perhaps an option. That one of the new components of the CCR is the therapeutic foster care. And Danny was at our meeting, and she talked about the fact of coming back with a bigger report. Apparently, this might be an option that they're looking at, in that students might be able, the education system may be able to access the therapeutic foster care with payment as far as placing students in these programs. And we're talking about students who either need a step down before they go back into a comprehensive setting, or a step up, or even sideways, as far as students who, I don't know, the biggest issue that many SELPAs and school districts are facing is when they get a 20-day notice. And this 20-day notice says that even though you think that you have a student in an appropriate placement, then the residential care facility or non-public school will write the school district and say, you have 20 days to find another placement. It's very difficult to find another placement in that short period of time. Yeah. So this therapeutic foster care unit might be appropriate, and they're looking at considering how to make this perhaps an option for education. And we are going to talk a little bit more about that when we meet again. We had on our agenda the Larry P. discussion. Heidi was not able to get to the meeting, so that's something we'll talk about. And then our final item was talking about charter schools and mental health, and how to meet the behavioral needs of students who are in charter schools. And this can be a dilemma if you're independent versus a dependent charter, just based on the resources that may or may not be available for those particular students. So Michelle made a commitment to come back with more information about that concern. So based on, we probably will not meet if in fact the meeting is moved to Anaheim, because many of the people who were talking about reports would not be able to get to Anaheim. So we would just wait until we get the survey results from all of the commissioners about if we're gonna, what our October meeting looks like.
Right.
Okay. Michelle or Kimberly, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, very nice, Mildred. Thank you for that. I had the breaking barriers. Did you want to give any update on just time and remind folks about that?
Yes, we did talk about breaking barriers. I have it here, breaking barriers update. There is finally an agenda for breaking barriers, and that is in the 15th and 16th of November. And that's here in Sacramento at the DoubleTree. And I will send to Matt to send out to the commissioners the agenda and the final flyer.
Great. Thank you for that. All right. Thank you. And thanks, Kimberly and Michelle, for your work on that too. Mildred, your leadership. Really appreciate it. And also,
I'm sorry, Barbara couldn't get there.
That's all right. We know Barbara's passionate about this area as well. And I love that there's many outside folks that have been consistent and engaged, and appreciate their involvement as well. So thank you for that. All right. We're going to go ahead and jump on in. So item number 9 is our assessment update. And you know that we consistently have representatives from the assessment division come down and talk to us about what's happening. And Summer, always appreciate the fact that you are our liaison to the assessment work. You've done a great job with that. And it's always a highlight when we get Michelle Center herself to come down and give us the update. So Michelle, it's great to see you. Thanks for coming down.
I think Matt thinks I'm vertically challenged. Not if you just saw what he just did, but this whole thing lowered about a foot for me. So, good morning, everyone. Happy to be here to provide the update. I'm also going to have one of my staff join me in a moment to do part of the PowerPoint presentation. His name is Mike Torres, and it's just another opportunity for me to showcase some of the great staff that I have working for me, so you don't think it's just me. I got 50 great people under me. Otherwise, I would barely be standing, right? So a little bit of an update, and I think Matt wanted me to use that. So today we'll talk a little bit, tiny little bit, about alternate assessments as well. And I know there's acronyms here, and no one did the speech, but I remember the speech from last time. And it's like a little test when you're up here to not use acronyms. Mike, I forgot to warn you, no acronyms, no acronyms. So a little bit about the English Language Proficiency Assessment, and then the ISAP, which stands for the Individual Student Assessment Accessibility Profile. That one's really long. And I think it was last time I was here and I talked a little bit about that process, and I read some expressions on people's faces that told me that you were not as familiar with that process as I would have liked. And so I offered to come back, and that's the process that Mike is going to talk about today. So, in terms of alternate assessments, I have been coming before you now for quite some time, quite some sessions, talking about the work to improve our English language arts and mathematics alternate assessment. And I know I've been telling you I've been doing that, but I haven't shown you that I've done it. So I wanted to come today with just a couple sample items that shows I'm following through with what I said I was actually doing behind the scenes. And as you might recall, I had some concerns with the language complexity of some of the items within the alternate assessment for those two content areas. I was concerned it was unnecessary in some items just to get to what we were trying to measure. It was an unnecessary burden. So you don't need to really read these items as much as notice the before item. You'll see that there's more language on that screen. And if you look at the after item, we're still assessing the same thing. You still are looking at informational text, in other words, these two tables, but you're doing it without all of the extra wording or the story that goes behind it. So you're still assessing the same thing, but without the complexity that was artificially in that item. The next thing you'll see, one of the things we did with math, not only did we reduce the language in the math item, which is important, but we also changed the orientation of the graph to something that would be more common. So you'll see that we did that. So these are some examples of the types of changes that you'll see. So in other words, we're not changing what's measured. We're still measuring the same things that we were measuring before, but we're trying to be a little more deliberate in ensuring that there's not unnecessary complexity. Still aligned to our connectors. So you'll see these kinds of changes when we release in January updated practice tests. So this will be available to the public for them to see in January. So our lovely alternate assessment for science. Let's recall that this has been a long process, and we have been doing this as partners with you and coming before you and showing examples of this test. So let me give you a little update of where we are. We're going computer-based for 18-19. Reminder to all of you that this test is one-on-one administered, right? So you have that examiner sitting with the child to interact with that device as needed. We wanted to make sure that we reduce the burden. We heard loud and clear from those who administered the last version of this that it was too burdensome, too much time for the examiner to administer it. So we're looking at some of those examples of the orientation activities that are within the assessment and whether or not the more complex ones could be done via a video or a graphic. So instead of the teacher having to build maybe something elaborate for use, they could instead show a graphic. And I'm sorry, all the examples in my mind are with live items. So I would share an example with you, but I can't think of one that is going to be public. So forgive me for that. But I'm happy to share some public items in one of the future meetings when we have some that are ready. So as you recall, we're trying something very different with this assessment, very different. And we knew that it was going to take time, and it is going to take time. Not only take time for us to develop this type of test, but take time for our schools and districts to change their behavior. So in other words, we might recall that one of the big things we did was we tried to allow our schools to assess near when they did the instruction, right? That was one of the major changes. That takes time. Everyone now still wants to test everything at the end of the year because that's what they're used to doing, right? So we are developing a document, and I can't remember the name of it because it's changed so many times, but we are developing a document for our districts to use that is going to give them enough information about the content of the test for them to really make a deliberate decision about when in the year they should give each of those tasks. And then within that document, we're actually putting a little sample table that's filled out for them that then they can fill out for themselves that says, oh yes, that content I teach, that on mid-April. I'm going to test that right after that instruction in mid-April. So we're being a little more deliberate in terms of the resources that we're providing to try and encourage that change to happen because we do recognize that change has not happened yet. The other thing is we are probably going to rename some of the aspects of the different components of this test to more accurately reflect what it is that we're doing. So you may have heard me just use the term orientation activity. You probably have not heard me use the term orientation activity when referring to this assessment before. You all knew that there were activities because we've talked about the activities. I think one of them that I showed you before, the activity was showing the student a cup of water, and we were putting things in the cup of water, and some of them floated and some of them sank. That was an activity, right? We think it might be more appropriate to term these things along with what their purpose is, right? So for those activities that are done prior to the questions, they're really orientation. They're making sure that our students are oriented to the type of content that we're then going to test them on. And then we test them on things that are very close to that exact orientation activity, and then they get a little more abstract as the questions go along, okay? So when I show you an example, you'll see that. Hopefully what you've just heard me describe is consistent in terms of the spirit of what we talked about, but also you can recognize that we're making a lot of changes. We're looking at the information we're getting from the pilot, we're making adjustments based on feedback. One of those feedback was, gosh, this is really hard to administer, right? We're making those adjustments and improvements, and then still keeping with the spirit of what we said we would do. And so as soon as I have an example, I will make sure and come back to you all. I should look at my notes and make sure there wasn't anything I was supposed to say, because people write these things for me, and oh no. Okay, so then our English language proficiency assessment for California. The big news here is that we received money in the budget to develop an alternate assessment for our English language development test. So I can't tell you very much about that because we're currently in contract negotiations, so I don't have a date to share with you, but we will have that along with timelines for moving that assessment onto the same computer-based platform that all of our other tests are on. That will go before the board in November for their action. So assuming that the board approves the contract that we are negotiating right now, I'll be able to share with you at the meeting after that some timelines related to the development of our computer-based English language development test, as well as the new alternate, which for right now we're calling alternate LPAC. Okay, so next I'm going to have Mike go ahead and come up and talk to you about the steps involved in this approach that Smarter Balance has developed for all students. I just want to point that out before he starts. This is really a process for all students, and I think the thing to take away from this, the one thing to take away, whether you like every step in the process or not, is that it's deliberate. So think about that as you hear the steps that Mike's going to go through.
Great. Thanks, Michelle.
Thanks,
Welcome.
Michelle, for that introduction, and thank you, Commission, for giving us the opportunity to share with you the ISAP process, the Individual Student Assessment Accessibility Profile. So on the slide, we have, that you have in front of you digitally. Creating a practical approach to accessibility resources. So the ISAP process itself is designed to make the process of selecting accessibility resources for students, and as Michelle indicated, for all students, not just students with disabilities, to make that convoluted process a little bit more streamlined, considering there's the 3 different layers of accessibility resources. You have your universal tools for all students, you have your designated supports for all students with the recommendation of a teacher or parent, and you also have your accommodations as identified in a student's individualized education program or their 504 plan. So the ISAP process, and at this point I've already defined ISAP. Can I just say ISAP? Is that okay? Okay, okay, great, thank you. The ISAP process includes preparatory steps to create a process within the LEA level to determine the appropriate resources for students. There's a step in the process to actually create the actual profile, the individual student assessment accessibility profile itself, and then it includes steps in which the educators can check to ensure that the designated supports and accommodations are entered correctly into the test delivery system, the test engine, which allows them to access those tools during those statewide assessments. On this slide, we have an example and a link to a recently revised document that describes the effective use of accessibility resources. There's a link there available for you to check out that document. The resource describes the step-by-step process to systematically and thoughtfully consider accessibility resources for all students who may need them. And again, the reiteration there is all students. That would include your students with disabilities as well as your English learners and any other parties who may benefit from such resources to get a valid and reliable test result for those students. We recommend that the IEP and 504 plan teams use these processes when considering when available resources for online assessments are most appropriate for use with students. And that would be the designated supports and accommodations. So let's talk about the different steps in the process. It's safe to assume that you are familiar with the individualized education program process, correct? So through that IEP process, you have a team, and in that team, you have representatives with different roles. You have your administrator to ensure that the programs are there. You've got your special educator who works with the student, who's knowledgeable of the student. You may have, if it's a 3-year, you may have a psychologist to go over the results of the assessment. So, and you have the student who may even lead the meeting. So you've got all the different parties, and they all have their different roles and responsibilities in that IEP team meeting. Well, in the ISAP process, very similarly, we recommend that the LEA set up a team. Particularly, the first step would be to have a lead team member that would be then responsible for moving the ISAP process along for the entire LEA. LEAs are encouraged to have that one individual who's focused on leading staff in the use of the accessibility resources to improve teaching and learning in all classrooms for all students. We also recommend that LEAs establish a district-level implementation team with representation from all the different school sites. So it's good to have people represented from the different school sites who know their student populations and can take that information back to their school sites. The team members should develop a clear process for the use of accessibility resources to be implemented at all of the schools. So moving on to our second step of the ISAP process, information and training. So as I mentioned earlier in the presentation, the the accessibility resource process can be convoluted with the 3 different layers of resources. It's amazing how many phone calls we get at the assessment office from teachers who are surprised to know the existence of specific resources that we have. I didn't know that we can offer this particular resource. When I was at the Bilingual Coordinators Network presenting on resources for English learners, a lot of them were surprised at the different types of resources we have available to meet the needs of those students. So it's important to have information and training and make sure people know about what these resources are and how best to apply them to students who may possibly benefit from them. So in this process, we ensure that accurate information and explicit training is provided to the different stakeholder groups in the LEA. Ideally, this step would occur early in the year. And I know with assessment, it's very easy to think, well, assessment occurs at the end of the year, so let's talk about that at the end. And we'll talk about why that's really important to start here at the beginning of the school year. So beginning of the school year would help prepare educators in the LEA to make the sound decisions regarding the use of accessibility resources in classrooms and on the assessments. Questions to answer would be who, what, and when guide the LEA implementation to ensure that everyone has the knowledge needed to select these appropriate accessibility resources for individual students. Another thing that's not in our notes, another reason to start off early in the school year, is once those have been selected later in the ISAP process, the student needs to practice. They need to practice with that particular resource so that when they see it on the assessment, it's not their first time seeing it, it's not their second, it's not their third, that they are very comfortable with that resource. So we're testing their abilities and their knowledge of the content and not on their ability to use the particular resource. So important things to consider. The next step would be identifying students. So back to the IEP process, there is a process in place for all the different school districts to identify which students would benefit from having an individualized education program. Similarly, in the ISAP process, there is a step in here, step 3, to identify which students would possibly benefit from using these accessibility resources. So step 3 addresses how to systematically identify these students who could benefit from resources. It begins by the identification of individual student learning characteristics at the classroom level, whereas on the IEP, it would also be classroom level, but there would also be assessment involved. So this would be, for the ISAP, the observation by the teacher and the educator. Determining what the student needs to fully access instruction and assessment, matching those needs to the available accessibility resources, because now, part 2 of ISAP process, they've learned about what the different resources are available. So that's the key, is knowing what's available and now finding out which students can benefit from those particular resources and matching them to the students. And then implementing the use of resources both in the classroom and for online assessments, and I'll add in there for practice tests and additional practice with that resource, such as speech to text. So students should be using that beforehand, particularly a version of speech to text or other resource that would be available on the assessment, okay? So continuing with student needs, the procedures described within the ISAP process consider individual student needs and recommend a team approach. Again, similar to your IEP process, when you're deciding on what kind of goals, you just don't willy-nilly throw out goals. You look at, or services, you look at what does the student actually need, right? And then what services can we provide? And then how can we measure that there's improvement by goals? Similarly, in step 3, we're looking at the individual student needs. So you would look at input from classroom teachers or intervention staff, special education staff, staff specializing in English learners, migrants, and foster youth. So all of those factors would play a role, and those would be the professionals of that team that would know the student best. Along with all of that would be your educational history that may include history of language proficiency, academic performance, physical or medical information, and individual needs already listed in the IEP or the 504 plan. So speaking of IEPs and 504s, individual needs must be considered for all students, including students with IEPs and 504s. So the ISAP process isn't just for the general education population. It's also for students with disabilities who have an IEP or students who have a 504. The goal for students with IEPs or 504 plans is to provide developmentally appropriate opportunity and access to assessment. Additionally, the goal is to ensure that students with the most severe cognitive abilities are offered a developmentally appropriate opportunity and access to the assessment. And the CDE does offer some guidance on our website for IEP teams in the determination of whether or not a student would need an alternate assessment over taking the general assessment. In some cases, the IEP will specify that a student should take the California Alternate Assessment instead of the CASP summative assessments in ELA, mathematics, and science. So going back to that team approach for step 3, LEAs are given considerable flexibility to determine the steps and the process that works best for them in considering the assignment of these accessibility resources. So depending whether the LEA is large, the LEA is small, the size of the team is flexible, so the ISAP process can be changed based on the actual individual LEA's needs. The ISAP process training emphasizes that the educator or team of knowledgeable adults about the individual student's needs and characteristics are involved. We recommend a team approach to help ensure that a wide range of information about the student is considered in the decision-making process. For students with disabilities, the IEP team can help serve that purpose. And lastly, another very important component of determining the appropriate accessibility resources would be having families as partners. And I know IEP teams include a very important member of the IEP team is the parent or guardian, so that they can provide that input from their observations at home and their support for the student at home. We encourage LEAs to partner with families to provide information on the available accessibility resources so that they can be meaningfully involved on the identification and selection process. Finally, moving on to step 4. We've talked about steps 1, 2, and 3 quite a bit. Step 4 is actually selecting the resources. So we've talked about the student's needs. Now, in the ISAP process, we're talking about selecting the specific resources. Once the student's needs are actually identified, LEAs must match the student with those appropriate accessibility resources. Some helpful tools would be the Smarter Balanced Usability, Accessibility, and Accommodations Guidelines, the UAAG, which was developed to assist with the selection of resources to best meet the needs of individual students. Another very helpful resource is the Resources and Practices Comparison Crosswalk that provides a description of each resource along with its classroom equivalent. Very helpful document because it shows a side-by-side table. This is typically the type of support that a student receives in class, and right next to it would be the equivalent support, or we call resource, for the assessment. So links to both of these resources are available on the resources slide at the end of the presentation. As alluded to earlier, practice time is really, really important. We can't stress enough the importance of providing plenty of practice time for students to interact with the resources that have been provided to them. Again, students shouldn't see this the first time on the assessment, the second time, or the third time. It's a continual process throughout the year. So it's really important to start that ISAP process at the beginning of the year. Not only should these accessibility resources be a part of everyday classroom use, students should have plenty of opportunities to become familiar with accessibility resources for online tests by accessing the practice and training tests as well as the interim assessments. So those are great opportunities to practice. So we're going to really briefly go over steps 5, 6, and 7. These are the steps where educators assign the accessibility resources for online testing and ensure that resources are provided based on individual need. So in step 5, once those actual resources are identified, the designated supports or accommodations must be entered into the Test Operations Management System, or TOMS as we like to call it. This will allow students access to those resources during the online assessments. Notice that we don't mention universal tools. The reason universal tools aren't on that list is because they're available to all students. They don't need to be turned on, and they're just available in general whenever a student opens up an assessment. So this process is designed for designated supports and accommodations. In step 6, before students actually engage in an online assessment, educators should perform a pre-administration check of those assigned accessibility resources in TOMS, just to make sure the correct accessibility resources have been activated for each individual student. There may be a time where a test administrator forgets to turn on a specific resource for a student, and the student gets a few questions in the test and they realize, hey, I don't have this particular resource available for me. And there's steps in place where that student can pause, and the test administrator can then add that resource for them so that they can get a valid and reliable test. So step 7, as students prepare to begin the online assessments, the test administrator approves the students who log into the test session, and they use the View Settings icon to confirm the correct accessibility resources available for each student. The previous step at step 5 is typically done at the test is typically done by the CAS coordinator or the test site coordinator. Now we're talking about at step 7, where the actual test administrator, the person who's actually going to administer the assessment, then does their own check to make sure that that student has the right accessibility resources selected for that particular student. And that's the last step of the ISAP process. The student happily takes their assessment, they get their accessibility resources, and we get a valid and reliable test. So, happily, because the tests do help reduce test anxiety. So, support and resources. So, throughout the presentation, we've included references to specific resources to help LEA staff go through and perform the ISAP process to determine what proper accessibility resources that specific students can benefit from. So, on this page, we have our CDE webpage. We have an Accessibility Resources Module 1, which is new this year. It's an actual interactive module where people who are not familiar with accessibility resources can click and play videos, stop, pause, rewind, move to a different section. So it is rather interactive. It's a really great resource to try out. And then we also have the Smarter Balance Resources and Practices Comparison Crosswalk, that side-by-side that I was talking about, where this is the in-class support, and over on the right, this is the equivalent on our assessments. And then our second page of supports and resources includes the Usability, Accessibility, and Accommodations Guidelines, I'd rather say UAAG, the Embedded Accessibility Resources video tutorials, which are also a great tool because there's an individual one for every embedded resource available on the assessment. And if a student or a teacher or a parent wanted to see what does this actually look like, they can actually go to that website, click on that tutorial, and there'll be a really brief minute and a half, 2-minute presentation on what that resource actually looks like. So decisions can be made based on those tutorials. We also have the Smarter Balance Item Types and Accessibility Features document, which is a historical document that talks about the available accessibility resources for Smarter Balance. And then we have our CASP in action reports that you can take a look at. All right, so we have our feedback, and I'm going to invite Michelle to come back up.
So thank you. Now you know why I can present such great news to you, because I have people like Mike on my team. So, so what we wanted to ask you all now, one, I made the assumption that you all would hear about the ISAP process and that you would agree that that's a deliberate process and it's a best practice kind of approach to making these selections about accessibility. So I made that leap and assumption. So you might want to chime in if you disagree with that. Because the question that I have for you is, what else should we be doing to encourage the use of this very deliberate process by our educators out in the field? What are we missing? Because, you know, when I was here last time and I said ISAP, and I probably actually used the term that acronym, Barbara, and there was a look of from several of you like, I'm not sure I've heard that before. We get that same look out in the field. And you heard Mike talk about the many resources that we have, but we're still not quite there in terms of implementing it. And I'm going to tell you another story. So it wasn't that long ago, maybe a couple months. I'm looking back at, in case you don't know, ETS is here, and they are here every time it shows their dedication. I think it was a few months ago we had a focus group with parents, and one of the focus group panels that we had was specific to parents of students with disabilities. And the focus group wasn't on this topic at all, but the topic came up about accessibility and supports. And there definitely were several parents, and I assume that the parents who know the most about this are parents who participate on an IEP. I made the assumption those are our most informed parents about accessibility. And it was, some of the things they said were concerning. They even themselves didn't know of all the supports that could be available to their students. So we're here today to ask, what else could we be doing? Is there maybe a group that we need to reach out to? Is there another module that we need to develop? Or maybe you all want to go out on the road, get a little tour bus and visit everyone in California and get the word out. So that's our question to you today. And it's not only a question to you, it's a question that actually the consortium is asking all of its members. So it's not unique to California. This is something that the consortium invested in terms of documenting this best practice approach. And they're asking this overarching question of what else do we need to do to help get this implemented?
Yeah, great. Thank you, Barbara. And then Kimberly.
Hi, Michelle. Nice job. Nice job. See, I'm positive first. No, I won't.
First? Uh-oh.
No. I love this accessibility resource module 1. The minute he started talking about it, I thought, what a great idea. I think the professionals in the field, and I'm in a different place than Summer, just from what I hear, and I'm out now. They just want to know how to do it. They want to make sure that they're doing it correctly and giving them everything they can. And I think that that's what we have to make sure, that the LEAs know how to explain to the teachers, how do you do this? The problem is, as an educator, when somebody says, okay, this is new, just do it, and there isn't the time to actually learn to do it. If there's a module that I can turn on and I can see how to do it, that's helpful. It's when it's just said, okay, the test is in 2 weeks, please get it done. So I think that's wonderful. I haven't seen it, but I'm very happy with that. So I wanted to say thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Barbara. Kimberly?
I think for me, and I don't know the timeline. So my question is, what are the timeline expectations for the testing moderator training? Because I think when I think about when our teachers have to sign to say, yes, I've been trained, yes, I understand, yes, I'm prepared to do this, it seems to me like that's in the spring. And I'm wondering if we backed that up a little bit and made that something that is required at the beginning of the year, or the TOMS prep, Okay.
So you may have heard the response from ETS that it has been in spring, but we're trying to make it earlier.
Okay. That might be helpful just to drive the conversation and training in-house that would happen for teachers earlier.
And so there's also this differentiation between training requirements for educators who give our alternate and then those who are giving our other tests, like our Smarter Balance tests. So if you're giving the alternate, then there is an additional requirement that you are an examiner and that you've been trained, whereas we've kind of delegated that responsibility for those administrators that are given maybe our Smarter Balance tests. So we don't have as much direct control over the content of those trainings that are happening at districts. That's also an interesting idea about whether or not we could do a shorter module that might be helpful for them to specifically give, or tell them this is the module that you should be given when you're training your examiners for the other tests. Like
I'm
maybe
just-
there's something along those lines.
I'm just thinking from my own personal district, I'm going to go back and change my training schedule. It was just a light bulb.
Yeah.
Aha, like, oh, I'm doing this way too late
Mhm.
with the assumption that they're being trained every year, but we have a huge turnover with teachers, and I think we need to be thoughtful of that. So I appreciate that. That was a very good presentation. Thank you.
I think the timing also brings in a question about, ideally, this is not happening only for assessment. Ideally, you're having this conversation about what can I be doing in the classroom every single day? And so how do we get that? Yeah, that I feel like I'm taking on world peace almost, So,
Nice. Thank you, Kimberly. Summer and then Michelle.
Hi, Michelle. Thank you. I'll just speak as a principal and say that, what captures my attention in my very full email box is a question in the subject line. So when someone says, do you need help solving this? And then it's yes.
yes, okay.
Then I open it and look at it. Have you ever thought about this? Then I go, what? Yes, I do every day. So that's just a huge help. I can usually read through the spam really quickly. So if, you just alert that it's being sent to help me do something, solve some problem, then that gets my attention, if that helps at all.
It does, because that's so easy. We could send that email out along with the new module. And that's a pretty easy to do for us.
And then if I could just add, when I look at your list there, for me, when I have such limited time with staff, and I have so much to cover, the self-paced training modules can be really helpful because I can bargain time here and there. If they're willing to do this, I'll come and take their class, for 2 hours while they go do that. So sometimes I can't fit it into an already full staff development schedule, but I can bargain with my time in supporting something that I think is really important. I'll come take their class for 2 hours if they're willing to sit down and watch this.
Nice. That's great, Summer. Thank you. Michelle.
First of all, I just want to say I've really come to love this test, and I know that would be like maybe a controversial statement, but because I feel like it's gotten very easy to administer. I've been in the TOMS management system, and I think it's easy to assign and track and fix all of that. And as a test administrator in the classroom, it's very easy as well. I think the kids have gotten really used to the accommodations. So there's so many pluses here in the last couple of years, and I see kids using more and more and more of them. So I just want to acknowledge that. But I think part of the issue is not your issue. It's just the website is really unuser friendly, and it's just overwhelming when you look at it and you're not sure what you're supposed to click on that would be best for you. Sometimes having too many resources can be overwhelming, like which one should I choose? So I feel like Summer had an awesome idea of just collecting your 3 best and putting them into some kind of mass email, and then principals can, disseminate from there. I was also thinking that, at the beginning of every school year, we have to do just a basic mandatory training on child abuse, and if we just had just a quick overview of what is in accessibility tools that are available, and then some links on that, and people had to get it, sign it, turn it in, just like everything else. You don't have to do anything in depth, but then they have it, and then later on they could go in depth if they get the email that Summer was referring to. I just feel like we have to build it in and make it happen, and you're going to have to kind of hand it to them, because even if the website was more user-friendly, it's just time-consuming, and the demands on time are just hard to really understand unless you're on a school site. So, but anyway, thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, go ahead, Summer.
Almost leave me breadcrumbs when it comes to the website. When I see something and I think, okay, I have to go on that website and find something, my brain automatically calculates 30 minutes. And do I have 30 minutes? And it might be a competing interest that I just go, okay, I'm going to do that later. And then I never find the 30 minutes.
Can I ask, is that the CASP.org website or the department's website?
Department's website.
Yes, absolutely.
If you can just leave me breadcrumbs, 1, 2, 3, and you're there. And then I'll be like, yay,
So we are in the process. In fact, my manager back there is the one leading the charge to redo the assessment pages on the department's website. So we acknowledge it is challenging. And so you'll be seeing that hopefully within the next couple months.
That's great.
And so the last thing that I wanted to bring up, and you know, as Summer, as you're, you know, given that you are the representative on our monthly calls, she did have the opportunity to view this already. But in the future, I'm going to also bring to you a new website. It's called Start Smarter. It is a website that is being developed by Smarter Balance with the goal that it will actually, it can actually be used for all of our tests. The purpose of the website is for parents. So the idea is it would be a single website that we could put on our student reports that go home to parents, and it would be written in parent-friendly language. You know, we of course would not want to direct parents to our website. So this one, they've invested quite a bit in terms of getting expertise on the type of language that really resonates with parents, and they have partnered with other agencies. And so the department is a partner, and we have reached out to all of the members on our stakeholder group. Your commission has your member, but we also have PTA and CTA and CFT and many other organizations that are on that particular group. And so we're currently actively getting feedback on that site that is developed for parents. And hopefully, maybe your next meeting, I'll be able to come back and show you some screenshots of that new site so that you can see how we will be better communicating with parents.
Oh, that sounds great.
Okay.
Thank
Good.
you.
I already have my topic lined up.
Yeah, that's perfect. That's perfect. Go ahead, Kim.
Are you tracking the number of tools that students are using? Are you able to track that? And are you seeing an increase?
So we've had this conversation, and it is so difficult. We currently have been tracking assignment, and we will be tracking usage. And it seems so easy when we say that, but then when you start thinking about what is usage and the data, the magnitude of the data behind that. So in other words, for every single item, we are going to start collecting information like, did they click on glossary? And then you'd have data for the large number of items for every student, and you'd say, oh, well, they clicked on that glossary 10 times. But the glossary was available 100 times. Did they use the glossary? So we are currently asking ourselves those kinds of questions and determining how we would analyze the data. So the capability for the first time is there, but it's a little more challenging than maybe you would first think. So we're taking some time in terms of thinking about how can we analyze and display this data so it's meaningful. I wouldn't want to make an assumption a student used a glossary when maybe they only clicked on it once. Is that using it? I don't know yet. So we want to make sure that it's useful. We also want to think about how to tell our districts to use the data, right? So if you've assigned a glossary to 1,000 students and you had 100 of them using it, you might easily think you assigned it to too many, when actually you may have assigned it to the right number, but you didn't provide enough practice so that the students knew how to access it. So we also need to work on how we would tell people to analyze the data. So we're getting there, but not quite yet.
I think that would be great information if I were an administrator trying to see what we were determining was necessary for students and building that into a walkthrough form, that I was walking into classrooms looking for opportunities that students were getting all year long.
Mm-hmm.
So that would be a good way to drill down for teachers and administrators to help monitor that at a site level. So that would be great information to have. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thank you for all the information, both of you. Thanks for coming down and bringing the resources and posing the question. And I really appreciate the recommendations and suggestions from all of you commissioners. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrick. It's always great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Welcome.
I will only take Carrick Ashley, Deputy
Yes.
Superintendent of Performance Planning and Technology Branch. I'll take just 20 seconds to
Good.
say we appreciate not only your support, but your expertise, and that when you come to us with issues, you have suggestions on what we might do, and it's just very helpful. And I was especially happy to hear that once the test is done and we figure out how to count the accommodations, that Michelle's going to take on world peace, because that's really, really important. So
We look forward to that too.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, looks like we have public comment on this item.
Joyce Childs, Cars Plus.
I'm a little disappointed because I filled out the yellow thing a long time ago, and then they all leave, and they aren't going to hear what I have to say.
Oh, they're
I stopped
staying.
them at the door. I hope they stayed. I really do. Hi, Joyce Childs, representing Cars Plus and the practitioners in the classroom. And I really agree with what my friend had to say, Michelle. Yes, this is working in the classroom, and it is working for the students, and it is working for the teachers that are working directly with special education students in secluded environments. But the resource students are not getting the same practice, they're not getting the same availability. The district that I have worked in for years still does trimester benchmarks, and at the benchmarks should look like the state assessment, so because they're looking for some kind of idea about how well the children, the students will do in the spring. But at those benchmark assessment times, the district level is coming out and saying, no, they may not have any modifications or any accommodations. Everything has to be done like the state test. And so the gen ed teachers will not allow the children to use glossaries, calculators, speech to text, because they keep saying the district level has said, no, they're not allowed to use these things. But you guys all know that those things are available in the spring at the state assessment, and without the practice. So my note to them is twofold. I really like when they said that the teachers need assessment training way earlier than the week before the test. You know, right now I know that the site coordinators go to a SELPA level training in January. Those people really need to be trained in August as well, because this is a whole year-wide thing. And it's so important that with inclusion, because I'm 1,000% behind that. The people who've been on this commission for a long time know that Joyce gets it. And I want you to make sure that the general education teachers know the things that are available for them so that our students are successful in their milieu.
Great point. Thank you, Joyce. Great. Great, thank you. Okay, thank you, commissioners. We are moving on to item number 10. Item number 10 is our preliminary education specialist credential update. So I'd like to welcome William Hattrick back and Sarah Solari back. Welcome. Thanks for coming. We always look forward to your updates and hearing what's happening at the commission. So welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having us again. Okay, both are on. Great. Okay, so let me just move that forward. Thank you again for having us. I'm pretty sure most of you were here last time when we went over what's been happening in the state, and so I won't go into detail, but we had great progress at the last commission meeting, and a big thank you to Kristen Wright and Aaron Christensen from the Department of Ed for attending our commission meeting and really helping move forward the special education item. So what we had happen at the August 2018 commission meeting is that, first of all, titles were adopted for the credentials, yes. And so we have the education specialist mild to moderate support needs credential, and we have the education specialist extensive support needs credential, and then of course we still have the deaf and hard of hearing, visual impairments, and early childhood special education credentials. So we have 5 initial special education credentials. Yes, great progress. Also, wonderful progress is that the commission adopted the education specialist program standards. So one set of program standards for all 5 initial programs. And then teaching performance expectations for each of the 5 programs. So there's a unique set that describe the knowledge, skills, and abilities that are unique to the mild to moderate support needs, the extensive support needs, the deaf and hard of hearing, the visual impairments, and the early childhood special education competencies that teachers will be learning to gain whichever credential they are seeking. And so each of those were passed. And so what does that mean to the field? Well, right now we're composing a program sponsor alert that hopefully will go out tomorrow. I just like to hit this microphone. That will go out tomorrow to educator preparation programs that will let them know how they transition from the old standards to the new standards. And so that will be on our website, along with, actually these standards are currently on our website. And all programs will transition to these new standards by the fall of 2020. So that's the timeline for our work. Okay, I'll transition over.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so the next task in front of the commission will be authorization statements. And we weren't sure, probably at the last meeting, we weren't sure if they would be happening in September or a later meeting, but we will be addressing those at the November commission meeting, and that's at the end of the month of November. We want to make sure that the teachers, the ed specialists are authorized with what's consistent with the scope of preparation they're receiving. So taking a look at the new standards and TPEs, we want to make sure that that authorization statement is really succinct and clear for the field, for districts, for school site administrators, so everybody knows specifically what that special ed teacher is authorized to do. And we will be doing that at the end of November. Anything else for authorizations right now? Okay. It is expected that for deaf and hard of hearing and visual impairments, that those authorization statements will stay the same. They will still be authorized to work with students who are either deaf and hard of hearing, visually impaired, so those authorization statements would not need to change. We also need to look at discussing and then developing a bridge authorization for current education specialists. There is new knowledge in the new credential areas, especially for mild to moderate support needs and extensive support needs. So traumatic brain injury, working with students with orthopedic impairment. We need to figure out a way so that current teachers in the field would be able to bridge that knowledge gap and get that additional knowledge that's in the new credentials if they so choose. Kind of quick today. Those were our major updates, but if you have questions, comments, or suggestions, we're happy to answer them.
I really appreciate you bringing this information back. So I'd love to open it up to commissioners. I know that you gave us the last 2 meetings the opportunity to come and view or engage with the commission. Appreciate that you've reached out and asked for input. So I don't know if commissioners have thoughts, reactions, questions on either the things that have been already approved or the things that, if you could go back to the work in progress slide and leave that up, that would be great.
Probably that one, maybe.
Yeah, Barbara and then Janine.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I have a couple of questions. You ended with if they so choose. So are you telling me that if they don't choose to take the bridge classes, they're out? That's what he said,
They're
if
out.
they so choose.
Well, no, every teacher maintains their existing authorization. So all credentials are valid credentials. Every teacher maintains a valid credential in California. So a teacher may decide that they want to add OI and TBI, the additional competencies that are within the new credentials. They may decide to do that, or they don't have to do that. It's the teacher's choice. So when you say they're out, what did you mean by they're out?
Okay, so I'm a little confused. So if they have a child with TBI in their classroom, are they going to be told they must go take this?
Well, they wouldn't be authorized to serve a child.
Well,
with
right
TBI.
now, there are students with TBI in all classrooms. From what you're now calling extensive support needs all the way to mild, and they don't have TBI training, the child happens to be in their class. So I'm asking you, and I'm not being mean, I just don't understand what.
And I think that problem is one we're trying to fix with the new system being based on needs, but also being aligned to these disability categories. Because as that is the case, where there might be students with traumatic brain injury in
general ed
a mild mod, right.
Right.
Technically right now, because it's disability category specific, that mild mod teacher is not authorized to work with that student. Is that
Maybe you can say it better than me,
because I'm also having a hard time understanding that, because I mean, as far as I know, eligibility does not guide placement. So when we have that, we have various students in different classrooms, then if the teacher cannot service all those different students with the various needs, how does that work? I think we need clarification on that, right? I think that's where it's not making sense, since if you have a student with a TBI or a VI and you're not certified in that, so then you're out of guidelines, or you have to find a teacher who's certified in all three different areas.
Well, the IEP determines what services a student receives. How those services are provided is dictated by the IEP or negotiation between the district, the parent, the teachers. They determine how the services are provided to the student. So it could be that the student is in a gen ed classroom for 40% of the day to receive whatever it is, and then they get their VI or whatever services that they need.
No, we're talking
That's not the
about-
question.
because I think what we're
So let me stop us for a second, because I think there might be a little bit of confusion. And so, Kristen, do you want to?
So Barbara, I think, are you asking, are the teachers with their current credentials grandfathered in?
Well, yeah, that was part of it. My big fear is that I have a student 90% of the time with a TBI in general education. 10% he's out for adapted PE. Let's just say that's what it is. Is that general ed teacher going to have to go for the TBI authorization, because they're telling me that's what you're doing? And so you don't think that's what they're saying?
No.
Oh, I'm really confused now.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in this scenario, the 90% of the time that the student is in general ed, the IEP team has decided this is where David is in LRE, that general ed teacher is authorized to provide the general ed instruction, because it's not going to be the SAI or the specialized academic instruction. So I'm in general ed, I have a general ed credential, that teacher is appropriately credentialed to provide those supports and services, or that instruction.
All right, so let's take it to an SAI classroom where he's with me 49% and 51. I'm not really worried about the percentages. I'm worried that the special educator is going to have to take a TBI certificate class, whatever this is, to bridge them. The general ed teacher, who could have the kid for 80% of the day, doesn't have to have it because he's sitting in there for general ed. If the object is to teach the student with whatever their disability is and to make them the best they can be in any place they are, then I really am confused. I'm not trying to be critical. I just don't understand.
So the idea with the special ed credentials was to make them more broad so that we can serve student needs, right? So they're almost cross-categorical credentials based on the complexity of student needs. So we have the mild to moderate that serves all students regardless of disability, with the exception of VI and DHH, okay, and deafblind. And then we have the extensive support needs, again, with, with some, just with deaf, blind, I think. Well, anyway, so there's one minor exception with the extensive support needs. So the idea was that these teachers could serve all students, right? So that we're meeting student needs.
And I understand that. No, right, for the new credential, they're okay. But now we're going to do this bridging.
Right.
And if we're bridging, then we have to take TBI and we have to take all of this. So I don't get it.
The question is, are the teachers with their previous credentials going to need to get additional training in order to teach the same students they had yesterday?
But then also I really want to make this clear. With the amount of full inclusion we're doing, shouldn't the general ed teacher also have to have that information? If we're not trying to be specific, we're trying to do what's right for each and every student in the state of California. So that's where my question is. Is it all of a sudden we're throwing this in possibly for the older teachers, the teachers who are previously credentialed? Because you're telling me the new teachers are already going to have this information. Is that what you're telling me? Mm-hmm. They're going to come out now. If I'm graduating in 2020, I'm going to come out with TBI and OHI and whatever all these others are.
2021.
2021. Okay, I had the wrong date. And now we're talking about bridging the elderly teachers in. I didn't mean it that way. That was a joke. But I meant the people who already have knowledge who've been teaching TBI and OHI for 40 years anyway, without this little thing. But I think we are, personally, and I know I'm the difficult one on this situation, I believe it's great that you want to make the special education teacher the best they can be. I think every teacher needs to be the best they can be. And if we're bridging, then I think if general ed teachers are having, I hate these students, I don't like that word, having students in their classroom with, somebody help me here, other disabilities, then why aren't they getting that same knowledge?
So I just want to make sure, I'm going to clarify. I just want to clarify. So are you, Barb, are you asking that, or are you proposing that why isn't there just one whole credential for any teacher in this state? Everybody is an education specialist. Everybody should have all of these knowledge, skills, and abilities. So it's actually not gen ed, special ed, it's ed, it's education, it's all of it. So
I thought that's what the tree trunk was.
Are you proposing, but I think you're proposing that there's no such thing as gen ed, that it's just everybody's an education specialist.
I wouldn't say that either, because I think there are children who need specialties. So I'm not saying that, and maybe I'm coming off that way, and I don't mean to come off that way. And you know how I get extremely passionate about this. This, to me, is a slight on every special education teacher that is in the system right now. And it always comes down to the special educator. And yet, those general educators are struggling right now with every student that's in their class because they also want to do what's right for everybody. I think we are doing more silos than we've ever had before. That's my own opinion from this. I'll be done.
Yeah, David.
Is this dissimilar from the process we went through a couple of years ago where I had my ed specialist credential and then we created the added authorizations to ensure that, okay, Dave, you have your ed specialist credential, but you need the added authorizations for students with emotional disturbance as their eligibility criteria. Is that what the bridge you're talking about, or?
It may be, if you remember back to bridging the level 1 to preliminary with autism, is that sort of what you're referring to as well? I don't want to directly compare it to that because we haven't done that work yet, and we're not sure what the bridge, if there's a bridge, what that will look like. Mm-hmm. But we think it would be similar to that.
Yeah, but I want to make sure that, because I hear you, Barb. I'm not trying to. I just want to make sure that the authorization, the bridge, it would not be for the general education teacher. Right. I want to be honest and clear here. It would be for the ed specialist. And if what you're proposing is that there is just one credential where everybody is a specialist, then, you know, that's not what we've done. And so, okay.
So I mean, you guys have taken our feedback and you've invited us, and I know that you are working very, very hard to evolve the ed specialist credentials. And so thank you for that. I know we have a couple more questions, so thank you for continuing with us. Havania.
This might be a silly question, but has CTC figured out what the criteria may be for the current education specialist to want to participate in the bridge? What is the criteria for that teacher to want to pursue the bridge?
We haven't even. Yeah, we have not gotten that far yet. But by comparing the standards, you can see that there are areas like TBI, like OI. There's some more robust knowledge, skills, and abilities for teaching students with language disabilities. More about behavioral. So that's sort of all we have now. We know what the differences are between the current credential program standards and the new ones, but that bridge we haven't really sorted out yet what that would look like.
We haven't even actually approached the bridge yet. Right. That's actually after the authorization. So it's kind of, it's future work as in next year.
So you're saying potentially that TBI and OI categories would not be currently satisfied under the TPEs under the current education specialist mod severe credentials?
They're currently
TBI is under mod severe.
TBI is, but they're not in mild moderate.
They're not in mild mod.
Correct.
Not in mild mod.
Right.
They're not in mild
mod.
Mod
severe, yes. Or intensive need.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, we don't have intensive in action
But
yet.
in the new structure, they'll be in both.
Right.
And it'll be based on the student's needs.
Right.
So then it's going to be contingent upon what the district says, what type of students are currently served in your classroom, and they will look at your existing credential and see if there needs to be a modification in your current credential or not.
I think that's the criteria they're talking about that'll still be worked out is what are the authorizations. And I just want to bring us back to the genesis of all this conversation and change, which is really came after the Special Ed Task Force, talking about how do we evolve our system from having kids labeled as mild mod and mod severe and stuck in classrooms that had those labels because the teachers had those labels. How do we evolve that into giving students the most access they can and the level of need that they require around support? And so one of the these conversations have been happening for the last 3 years. And I know that there's a lot of details to still be worked out. And I hear and totally get where the teachers are coming from around making sure, that all these special ed teachers are not forced to go back to college after they've been doing this work for 20 years. I mean, that's very reasonable. Right. But I think the whole bridging conversation and all that has yet to even come to fruition. That's what's coming up in the next 3 to 6 months, right? And that work has to be done around, my own staff having concerns. How will we monitor to make sure that the appropriate credentialed teachers are working with the appropriate students in the classroom? All those things still need to be worked out. But I think what I think is very positive is that everyone across all the policymaking boards, including the CTC, have basically said, we agree that students should not have to wear their disability category on their hat, and we want to presume competence in everyone. So we're not going to label kids by their disability category and then assign them a teacher or a specific classroom. We're gonna basically say that teachers know how to teach, and we're going to give them the skills they need to teach the wide range of students, regardless of their disability category. And there is specialty, like Barbara said, there's still specialty that is required, special knowledge. And so teachers are going up through now that common general ed, special ed trunk together. where they're learning a lot of the same basic pedagogy around how you teach a wide range of diverse learners. And then they're branching off into their specialties, whether that be special ed or whether that be single subject science or whatever they decide to do. So I just think this is a huge signal for our state that we are trying to move towards more inclusive classrooms, more recognition of multi-tiered system of support, and how we can use our teachers collaboratively without crushing them in caseload, without, we already know those things are issues. So those are the things that need to be teased out over the next few months. And I think that's kind of why it was bifurcated, to really talk about first, what do we want teachers to know and do, and how do we want to label them so that we're trying to move away from labeling students, because we know that mild mod means you might get a diploma and mod severe means you don't. And so how do we move away from that into the next evolution of the credential? And it probably still will be bumpy and we'll still have to figure it out. But I think, all the warnings are heeded because we already have a shortage. And I think you guys know more than anyone that we're trying to not discourage teachers from going into the special education realm, nor current teachers who might think that they're going to have to go back to school and spend a bunch of money to get their credentials. So I think the grandfathering conversation is one to still be had, right?
Critical.
And so I appreciate the partnership and all the folks trying to gather around for all the things that you guys have said we've been wanting all these years. So thank you.
And if I could just add, I think, like Sarah mentioned, if you didn't have a chance to see them in the agenda item, the new standards and that have been adopted and the new teaching performance expectations are posted on the CTC website now. And I think that might give you a better sense of how the standards are, the roadmap for the programs, and then the TPEs. You can look at all of those for the 5 initial credentials and see what specific candidate competencies there are under each of those credentials.
I had a second part to my question.
Yes, go ahead, Havania, and then Steve.
Did I hear that there's going to be something put on the website, how to transition from the current TPEs to the new TPEs? Did I hear you say that?
So we are developing a transition plan for programs to address. That transition plan won't be put on the website until late September, but the program sponsor alert that will be put on to the website, hopefully, like I said, tomorrow, is just notifying programs the standards were adopted, TPEs were adopted, take a look at them, start thinking about how you will transition. We do have, and we are creating a more specific transition plan to help programs move from where they are now to where they will go. Because if you remember prior, we had one set of program standards for each credential area, and those program standards really were a blend of program language and candidate competence language. So we teased those apart. We had that work group tease those apart. So now we have one set of program standards for all ed specialist programs, and that program language it assesses, tells the program what the program's responsible for, and then the TPEs are distinct and unique for candidates. It's what candidates need to know and be able to do.
I guess my question is there a way for us to get an alert for that, or do we have to actually visit the website and track it down?
Yeah, anyone can subscribe to the PSD e-news.
Okay.
That's probably the best way to do it because that's where the program sponsor alert will be, and that comes out every Friday. So in addition to the program sponsor alert that comes out tomorrow, when we have the transition plan up and ready in late September, we'll also send that out in the PSD e-news. So that's really the best way because that comes out without fail every Friday.
Bless you. Stephen, and then David, and then Kim.
I had a question around the piece about the programs that are existing moving to the new program standard. It sounds like that in your transition plan, helping us in kind of understanding what's the difference that's been added with the new program standards so that we can look at whether those are things that we need to change in our program or is it maybe already existing. as we try and meet the new program standards. We right now I'm involved in the credentialing for special ed for the mild moderate, and in our program now we've been existing, and of course we want to continue with that. So it means that we're going to need to look at changing our program to meet the new standard. So I'm just trying to get some kind of understanding about is there some analysis that's been done that kind of says, this is what the program standards were, this is where we're moving, this is what they are now, this would mean that you need to do these kinds of things. Will it be that detail in your...
So we don't have a crosswalk, if that's what you're kind of referring to.
Yeah.
But these are things, so if you think about the program standards, they're really about your systems in place. So program standard 1 is about program design. What is your theory, your rationale, your vision around your program? What curriculum are you using? That's program standard 1. Program standard 2 is around, allowing your candidates to practice the TPEs, practice, monitor, and assess, the TPEs. And so what is your system for do your candidates first go out and observe, and then do you have them do small little groups? It's kind of, again, what systems what do your candidates do throughout your program from start to finish? Program standard 3 is your field placement. Again, what does that clinical practice look like? How is that designed throughout your program for your candidates? 4 is, gosh, you're making me memorize it. 5 is the TP. 5 is actually what assessment of your candidates. How do you assess your candidates so that by the time they're finished with your program that they're competent, that they've earned that credential, or earned the recommendation for a credential. And then 6 is the individual induction plan, that you're sending them with a plan for their future development. 4 is monitoring their progress towards reaching credential requirements. So these are things you have in place in your program. You probably have a credential analyst who's like, hey, you still need to do this, this, and this, or you don't, you're short for instance, for gen ed, they have to have 600 hours of clinical practice, right? So you're probably keeping track of that somehow, and you're going to be keeping track of how many hours of clinical practice you have for your special education candidates. It's really about your systems. And so I don't imagine there's going to be a huge, oh my gosh, we have to create, all this stuff. I think it's more of a packaging issue. Okay, we need to, we're packaging this to show how we're meeting these standards. So it's a reframing, if that makes sense.
It does. My question, though, when we've moved it to this issue about looking at the 2 now credentials, the experience that we're expecting them to have versus the issue when we had 7 different, the experiences were unique to exactly that particular credential as they were getting through. And that's what the observations, those areas that are part. Now that we are looking at having only 2, our programs have to make sure that there's probably more experiences in those areas that we're asking of moderate needs versus severe needs, those kinds of things. That's what I'm trying to get at. So it means that we'll need to look at how do we address those.
Yeah, you're going to have to look at how are we going to get our candidates exposed to the range.
Exactly. That's what I'm.
Of learners. Absolutely.
Yes.
Things
Yeah.
like that. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And we will have technical assistance events and availability throughout this whole transition period to help programs. So we're not just saying, here are the new standards and TPEs, see you in fall 2020, best of luck, right? We're going to have a lot of technical assistance activities and be able to help programs with that transition.
Right.
But those are more face-to-face activities.
Yeah.
As far as documents, I know you were asking about documents. I can't promise that. I know we have not created a document because we're working on the transition plan right now. So
Thanks.
Sure. Thank you for that. David and then Kim.
Thank you so much for the information. One of the questions or concerns that folks have been sharing with me is about the ability of special ed teachers to work with general ed students. I don't know if that has been decided or clarified, or if this is even the appropriate place, but I'm just curious, where's that at?
It hasn't been decided yet, and that's really what's on the screen now, the authorization statements that we're going to be discussing with the commission at the November meeting, and that's November 29th and 30th.
Great. Thank you. Kimberly?
This may be, I don't know if this is this working.
Mhm.
Okay, I just have to be really, I'm not hearing myself like I usually do. So as you're moving forward through defining this, what kind of guidance are we going to have? Because I feel like the difference between our mild, moderate, and what used to be severe used to be defined primarily of where students were being served, and then the when or how much time they were being served. And those two things tended to move kids away from the inclusion conversation. And it sounds like we're trying to move to the what do they need. So how is that going to be defined? Because I could see that as a really positive thing, but how are we delineating between, you know, a student who may spend a large part of their day in a general education environment but need a lot of support to do that? And is that part of the conversation about what's going to differentiate those two?
It's part of the future conversation we're having with CDE and distinguishing mild to moderate support needs and extensive support needs. The TPEs have already been adopted, so when you look at those, you'll see some overlap with the mild to moderate support needs and extensive support needs TPEs, but that's definitely a discussion we are continuing to have, and I assume we'll also have an update on that at the November meeting.
Right, but this really is the partnership with CDE,
Right.
because you know, there's no line, and so there's really not. It's not that you're on this side or you're on that side. It's what's best for this child or this student, and we're going to rely on the experts, the people who know that student, who are working with that student.
I could see there being flexibility in that, because I could see there being multiple providers that are involved depending on the different times of their day and the different settings that they're in. So that might be an interesting flexibility that'll be entertained, that hasn't been entertained before.
Right.
So, okay, thank you.
Thank you that's a great question. So I hope when you on commission days, when it's your day to come, you still have that element of excitement. I do really appreciate you coming, and I know you are leading or facilitating these conversations as we evolve our credentials, and I know that is no small task. And you've used the task force report as that guide, and we really appreciate that, and we really appreciate the constant engagement you have with the department and the partnership there, and with the field. And so I heard you say that there's another commission meeting in November. I heard you also tell us how we can access the current information on your website and subscribe to the listserv so that we get the update, and then have the opportunity. Of course, I know you are always available for us to call and have one-off conversations as we try to navigate it on our own. So I want to thank you for that. Kristen, yeah, please.
And as those agenda items come out, if you can't come here, or any member of the public can't come here, the CTC takes really seriously all the letters that they get, and all the members read those letters. And so if you have, personal opinions, or your stakeholders that you're representing do, I think they would appreciate hearing like specifics, especially ideas. You've all brought up some great points, but we're all looking for collective solutions, I think, just towards the greater good. So if anyone has any epiphanies or new interesting ideas, it would be a great time to have them, right?
Definitely.
Great. Okay, well, William and Sarah, thank you again for coming, and we look forward to your next visit. And we will engage in the content in between now and then, and reach out with any questions we have.
Thanks.
All right. Matt, I think we have some public comment.
Yes, Rebecca Accord, California Teachers Association.
Good morning.
Morning.
I'm here to represent CTA, and one of CTA's strategic plan, part of the strategic plan, is to obviously further public education and to recruit and retain quality teachers. what I've heard today is a lot of theory, which I appreciate. What I really would like to emphasize is that I think that the general teacher in the classroom, the people in the trenches, their voice should be listened to. And from what I've heard today, I'm really not confident that that has happened. And being one of those people who works with this population every day, that concerns me. And it concerns me for my students. And I want to make sure that they get the very best that they deserve. And from what I've heard today, I'm not convinced of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment, Matt? Okay. All right, commissioners. This is a topic that is hits at the core of, clearly for all of us and touches us all differently. We all have a different lens or entry point into this conversation. And I do encourage you to get subscribed to the listserv, get familiar with the TPEs, and take the opportunity to engage with the commission or send your questions to Michelle and I, and we will make sure that we forward them. However, we can best make sure that everybody's voice is represented. I know that William and Sarah have been very open and eager to get that information and feedback from us, so don't hesitate. All right, we are moving on then to a break. We will take a 15-minute break, and then let's come back right before 11. So 10:55 would be great. We will actually be ahead of time. Nice job. I know, Barbara, here we are. Oh, stop. All right, so with that, let's take a break, and I'll see you back in 15 minutes. All right, welcome back, commissioners. Thank you for the passion and the excitement and your engagement. Just really appreciate people that come together, leading with their heart and contribute. Right here. That's why we love you so much, Barbara. Yeah. Absolutely. All right, we are moving on to item number 11. Always a highlight to hear from Kristen Wright, our Director of Special Ed. If you're ready now, Kristen, we can do that. Or great.
Yes. So as we start off a new school year with our students, I think it's an incredibly exciting time. Both in our state and in all the great work that's going on in local districts. And I'll just give you sort of what's happening in the state and a couple tidbits. I've been sharing a few things throughout the meeting, so I won't be duplicative, but this time of year is, in fact, this past week is the week that we receive all the special education data in the state. And so this is the time where, and you probably heard a little bit from Shiloh yesterday, that they're receiving all that data, they're sifting and churning it and going through all of the different activities that we use the data for, all in a culmination of very compressed timelines this year where we'll be having most of our activities and information launched around the same time as the dashboard, all with much more current information than in past years, so that as our districts and our county offices and our charter schools are looking at their dashboard, and they may see some indicator that their students with disabilities subgroup is in need of improvement, they'll have some ability to go into that underbelly data and see what's going on and work collaboratively, regionally with their SELPA and their county offices to make plans on how to improve. And so as all that's going to be happening and rolling out, the state has been active in working with our partners around our state system of support. And essentially, our state system of support is how do we as agencies, state and regional agencies, really work collaboratively so that we're all working smarter and not harder, and that we're spending time supporting each other and making sure everyone has the resources that they need. So one of the ways that's going to happen is through the budget. As many of you know, there were a number of allocations made in the budget this year around regional leads. And one of those regional leads is SELPA regional leads. And the SELPAs were allocated at a general fund, an ongoing $10 million allocation. And we're currently in the process of writing an RFA that will come out in the next month that will request that that SELPAs apply to be, in the first round, capacity building leads, which is up to 4 SELPAs who will work collaboratively to cover the state to help other SELPAs build capacity around improvement and data analysis, so that we can get sort of this foundation across the state in how do we all work together towards improvement in our schools. So that will be round 1. The second round, which will come out a bit later this fall, will be around content leads. And so understanding that through the dashboard and through other data that is illuminated, that there are issues, common issues in the state that lots of LEAs are dealing with. And some of those may be around serving students in a more inclusive environment, or disproportionality, or serving students with autism, since our autism rate is about at 14% now of our students with disabilities in the state. That will be up to our SELPAs to decide what areas they're interested in applying to be content leads on, and then they would provide additional support to other SELPAs to be able to build capacity across the state. And those SELPA leads, when they're selected, will work really closely with the county regional leads, which that RFA has also gone out, as well as our community engagement leads. So we have sort of this statewide system of support that works and will continue to work closely with our regionalized system of support as we try to beef up capacity at all levels of our system. And so what I like about it is the coordination that's occurring, and we're trying to do the same thing just within special ed. So you've heard the term special ed collective, or different kinds of gatherings that we've had to try to figure out to make sure that we're all aligned just in the special ed realm around what activities are we doing. And we're doing that also internally in the special ed division. So we're, again, gathering all of our contractors and having everyone kind of look across what types of technical assistance they're providing, and making sure that we have consistency and alignment with everything that we're providing. And many of you got some of the tastes of the different areas that we're working on when you walked around yesterday. And in the past, all of our technical assistance providers and contractors were pretty much focused in one particular unit. And now they're more spread out within the units that have those specific areas of expertise. And the thinking is, once we see what the issues that arise are, really our TA providers are there to help us meet the needs of whatever's happening in that particular area. So an example would be disproportionality. The SPP TAP, which is the project title, contractor who assists us with working with districts that are disproportionate or significantly disproportionate, they're working closely with that unit so that they can meet the true needs of what's happening in districts. So we're just trying to be able to be more responsive and more targeted with our assistance to local educational agencies. And we're really looking at our SELPA partners even more than ever before as our conduits, our regionalized assisters, and I think SELPA's been sort of re-anointed in the system with, as part of this budget, being base funded again. So that sort of been reversed. And when the local control funding formula happened, the SELPA base funds were put into LCFF. They've now been pulled out, and they're directly going back first to SELPA. So Lots of changes. A couple other updates. We have been meeting as state agencies. So I don't think ever before have I seen the kind of coordination across the big state agencies as I'm seeing this year. And we've had a great partnership with the Department of Rehabilitation, as you know, over the past 5 years. But with our other state agencies who we do work closely with, we have started to meet more on targeted things. And one of those areas, as Mildred mentioned, is around high needs youth. And this is a population of students that often touches 3 or 4 state agencies, and we're all working collaboratively to address their needs. But oftentimes, we don't know that each other is working with them. And what we're seeing now is, and this is just kind of an example, would be a student who is maybe in the social service system, who also obviously would be in the education system and potentially has an IEP, who also has a developmental disability, who is in the DDS system and working with a regional center, who also may be served by a number of other state agencies as well. And so we want to make sure that we're coordinating between each other to know who's able to do what and who should take responsibility for what, so that we can make it more seamless for our students and families, because we don't want any child to not have what they need exactly when they need it. So it's sort of like the grand MTSS in the state and figuring that out. And so it was nice to see all the other state directors sitting around a table taking ownership of this group of students. Because as we know, when you're able to serve the highest need students, it sort of opens the door for being able to serve all the students, because you've really planned for the most challenged situations. A couple other quick updates. We are also currently working with the Early Childhood Division on the RFA for the $167 million that's going to be going out for inclusive childcare and preschool infrastructure. So it's one-time funds that will go towards building capacity to serve more children inclusively. So whether that's facility type things or professional learning, whatever an LEA might need to get up and running, to get more space and ability and access to do that money is going to be available. So I hope that lots of folks will be applying for that, because we know preschool is the gateway to everything. And we are also continuing our work on the EL special ed guidelines that'll be out later in the year. So a lot of good work going on with that. Just a reminder that we're at our 1-year anniversary of our dyslexia guidelines. And so there's a number of statewide rollouts that are going to be in county offices throughout the state. And if we can send out more information to commissioners, so that if there's one locally that you can go check that out. There'll be one coming up at Sac County. So we're definitely promoting that. Just a reminder that that the law changed last year to add phonological processing. And so we just sent a reminder out to districts, so you may have seen that reminder, just letting you know that the guidelines are there. And we want students, not just students with disabilities, but all students and all teachers to have access and knowledge of those dyslexia guidelines. Finally, I'll be attending the Breaking Barriers conference, and I encourage you all to attend as well. Also coming up, like we mentioned before, and you guys are voting, kind of giving your impression on whether you're not going to the Transition Alliance conference. Highly recommend you and audience members as well, and those listening. That'll be a fantastic conference. It was an incredible conference last time. Some of the advantages are really hearing from students. There's some great student panels. This year, the new director of OSERS, which is over special education and voc rehab at the federal level, Johnny Collette, will be there addressing us. And there'll also be, I don't know if anyone's seen the documentary Swim Team, which is about students with autism who competed in the Special Olympics. That director will be coming, and they'll be previewing that movie there with a panel, I believe. So there's going to be some really interesting and exciting things happening. Joe Xavier and I will be there also presenting, as well as lots of different staff and LEAs. Other than that, we are just pedaling fast, as you saw in the special ed division. We really appreciate all the work that you all are doing, and one of the benefits to having the structure we have for the advisory commission is it gives us the opportunity to connect with our peers in a way that is very authentic and organic. So sometimes having a medium to bring these issues forward is great for all of us. And as much as we always want to get together, we're all, in our lane, pedaling fast. So thank you for providing this opportunity to sort of, for us and my staff to focus on the bigger picture. So we get a lot of professional learning out of these as well. So thank you for all your work you do. It's my pleasure to be your state director.
Thank you, Kristen. It's great to have you. And again, just really appreciated the opportunity to see the detail of the work that you're doing. And as we heard from a number of commissioners, see where it overlaps and see who's up there pedaling really fast and with just a smile and a level of passion that was evident as we walked through all of the parts of the division. So thank you for that. Okay. Commissioners, any questions for Director Wright before I move on? Yes, David.
Not a question, but I just wanted to express my appreciation for the tour yesterday. It was amazing. Seeing all the folks that I've been emailing with for some up to 15 years. So putting faces with emails. And it really is an extension of the personal relationships that I've developed, I think, with educators over the year to the systems level and seeing the alignment. And so thanks for sharing and also the leadership and all the work of the team.
It's great. Yes, we had our moment of hearing specific names and recognizing it from the website and thinking, oh, wow. So that was great. All right. Any other questions, comments for Director Wright before we move on? Good job, Barbara. That's great. All right. Moving on then to item number 12. This is our update from our liaison. So we did hear from Assemblymember Thurman yesterday, and Senator Pan sends his regards. He's not able to join us today, but Dr. Sandoval, we just are so appreciative that you are here. We rely on you. You carry such a strong message back and forth between the State Board and the Commission, so I'd love to turn the mic over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. I always like to start my liaison report with gratitude, my sincere gratitude to each of you. The thing that struck me yesterday, well, there's so many things that are happening, but what I love to see is more alignment, that special education, especially in our conversations about larger accountability issues throughout the state, that's an iterative process. And I think from our report yesterday, we heard about the evolving dashboard and what that's looking like as a more user-friendly tool. It's really evidence that your voices and the voices of parents and educators and administrators in California, those voices are being heard loud and clear, and it's showing up in evolving documents and tools that will benefit our students. And what struck me yesterday was our gallery walk in the department. That was very powerful because we often talk in acronyms, institutional lingo, and we are, that's what we're charged with. We have to have these discussions. But yesterday, it really put a human face on the work that's being done and a common thread. And we visited, at least 10, 11 different stations within special education within that division or that area. And the common thread was really student-centered. That at the heart, the core of everything that we do, why we're here together, is we're focused on our students and how are we going to do right by our students. And when that's the driver, things do fall into alignment. So I want to thank you because it's about keeping our students at the heart of what we do. And it's also about relationships. And so yesterday was a strong reminder in meeting the good people who are doing the work day in and day out. I know that special education issues are complex. That's a given. But to understand the complexity of the work that each person is taking on and that all of you are doing. So thank you for the relationships that you've built among each other with different issues that you're liaisons on. All of this informs the state board and our work and helps us make better decisions. So I will continue to make sure that the issues that are presented here over these very rich days are included in our deliberations at the state board level. We'll be meeting next month, and we'll be this year in September and November talking more about indicators and about accountability and the evolving system. So I'm very grateful. I take a lot of notes, and I just want to express my gratitude to each of you for your heart for the work and for our kids. Thank you.
Very nice. Thank you so much for your kind words and observations. And like I said, representing the discussion in such an articulate way at the state board. We really appreciate that. Okay, commissioners, any questions for Dr. Sandoval? No? Okay, thank you. All right, we're moving on then. Item number 13, Voices from the Field. So this is an opportunity for us to engage directly with various stakeholder groups, and we don't limit them, putting out a question to those folks that are engaged with us directly and wanting to hear feedback from their groups on very specific issues. So the question that we put out into the world for this meeting is in your folders, but I'll go ahead and read it. Marking the beginning of the 18-19 school year, the Advisory Commission requests you introduce your organization and organization liaisons and share the focus or scope of your organization's work and any goals and objectives you can share from your organization for the year ahead. So just as you know, we launch into the new year, wanting to hear who's out there, what is the scope of the work you're doing, what are some potential intersections and opportunities to partner, and just get to know you. So with that, Matt, I'll turn it over to you and see who we have queued up.
First person that came up to me was the individual from SECO. So do you want to start off?
Great, thank you. Good morning.
Work? Okay. All right. My name is Ann Vesey, and I'm actually the Executive Director of Special Education for Riverside County Office of Ed. And as such, I'm going to be the liaison this year for the SECO group, which is the Special Ed Administrators of the county offices. Some familiar faces, so nice to see you all today. And as the administrators for county offices, we're actually a subcommittee for the county superintendents of schools. And we work under their direction and under their leadership in providing support for students with special needs throughout the counties that all of us work in. So really a big focus that we have is we have put out a SECO curriculum, which provides some guidelines and supports, and we updated that curriculum over the last 2 years, and that's ready to be presented for students with significant disabilities. We've really aligned it for the alternative assessments that are out there, so that's great. And this year, we're going to be working on the science standards. So we've got a great group of folks that do that. We bring in teachers from the field and work a lot with the accountability and assessment folks on that. So that's a great piece for us to have. The other piece that we've been working on a lot with our associate superintendents is the alternative dashboard and what that's going to look like and the impact that that's going to have for all of the alternative education programs. One of the pieces that we're kind of waiting for direction on and see where we're going to go, because an impact to that dashboard is our 18 to 22-year-old students who continue at this point to be considered dropouts, when in actuality they're not. They are participating in their transitional programs and having the support of educators to do so. So we're looking forward to working with our folks in the K. Smith's group to have that category 40, where those students won't be considered a dropout when it comes to the dashboard and the pieces that are part of that. Working a lot with our sister divisions throughout the county offices, as well as our SELPAs, in looking at the differentiated assistance and the needs that we have to support our districts that are having that need right now. So it's really great to hear about all the grants that are coming out and the supports that we're going to be able to hopefully be a support to and do all of that. So a lot of collaboration going on between educational services, the special education divisions in the county office, as well as the SELPAs that are sometimes a part of the county office and sometimes not. So the collaboration that's going is great. As I was sitting here this morning and listening, I was getting ideas for presenters to come to our SECO meeting. We meet up here in Sacramento every other month. It's just absolutely the opposite month of you guys, and it is in the same time frame. So if any of you ever want to come into one of those meetings, certainly contact us, and you're welcome to. But I know that we all want to hear more information on the assessment and accountability, and especially on the ISAAP process. I know that that will be a really great presentation that we'll be able to have. So glad to be able to be here and be a part of things. And is there any questions about what SECO is or does, or anything that we can help you with?
Yes, I do have a question.
Okay.
And just to clarify, this is different from public comment, which gives me the opportunity to ask questions. So thank you, Barbara, for that reminder. I didn't start by saying that. I am interested in more about what SECO does, and maybe there's an opportunity for you to come back at some point and give us a broader presentation on what the goals and objectives that you referenced and the resources that you're developing. And so maybe we can talk at another time about what that might look like. But really do appreciate you coming forward and telling us about it. And I think we're familiar with the work, but would love to hear the detail of the work.
Absolutely. We're
Great.
Glad to do that.
Good. Okay. Well, great. Well, it's great to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
I did not ask if there were other questions. I'm sorry. All right. Great. Okay. Next, Matt.
Kelly Connell Sandler, CTA, California Teachers Association.
Hello.
Hi, Kelly.
Hi. I am Kelly Connell Sandler. I'm liaison from the Special Ed Committee, which is one of roughly 30 committees at the California Teachers Association from our state council. Is this on? And I'm going to hear myself good. Dr. Acord has already been up. She's my co-liaison. I actually took this as an opportunity to say all the positive things that we feel. We come here and then we take what's from here back to special ed. We bring from the special ed committee back to you. We sit in a meeting all day on Friday, a liaison committee that's specifically for support services, and we say how pleased we are. I've been here a little over 6 years with the development, and I'm going to actually read because I was at Pebble Beach when my iPad and half of the nation crashed and went dead and didn't come back, and Apple's still working on it. But so I apologize to Matt already, but I'm going to be semi-reading because I did put a lot of thought into it, and I was able to kind of recreate it today. Okay, so if I can get, okay. So this is, I do have some concerns about things earlier today, and I have not Jonathan Swift's modest proposal, but I do have something that later I'm going to suggest that worked in another state that I hope provides helpful. But this is kind of a love note, and it's quite sincere. CTA really does appreciate the opportunity to liaison, and we have liaisons in every field where any education touches children, anything that impacts on children, anything that impacts on educators. But in particular, we appreciate what's gone on in this room and at workshops that we've gone to with you. So I'm going to make this larger, and I did come up here with the specs. Okay. We appreciate the opportunity to liaison with the Advisory Commission on Special Ed, and we really do feel that so many positive developments that began right here in this room have already improved the education of our students and consequently their educators as well. In particular, I really appreciate the hard work, particularly in recent years, with your dedicated adherence to your overarching goals and to accessibility and to the strategic plan mission goals, and we think that's been mutually beneficial for all of us. Okay? And yesterday, I think people didn't realize that some of the things that were being handed out were worked on right in this room quite hard for several years with the wordsmithing alone. And stay on, Apple. I own your stock. Come on, behave. Okay. CTA applauds that progress and recommends, and this is working together as we go forward. This is among the things that we would like to see happen. To preserve the continuum of service, to always consider the individual needs. I've shared with you that I trained on things that said student-centered language arts curriculum. That was the training forever ago. How that got lost in the shuffle, but it's coming back. Protect IEPs and their implementation, they're sacred. Protect and promote human rights, student rights, parental and teacher rights. Support public education, that's our focus. Everyone has, their role here, and that's ours. Work for full funding. I miss Miss Betty saying follow the money. Promote investment in technology, dear Lord, we need it. It changes lives. Kristen, what you shared with us, how it literally can overnight change someone's life. You'll get it. I didn't realize
it's okay.
I didn't realize that this was timed. I thought this was a report. Sorry, I didn't.
Yeah. You can go ahead and keep
okay.
going. It's all right.
And you need some praise. So you don't get much. Okay. Support investment in technology, including training, support transition at all levels. Barb, pre-K to adult, school to career and to college and career. Support workability specialists. I think they're critical. I know I couldn't have done what I did for kids if I hadn't had her or him. Support local decision-making and wherever you can. Promote and ensure universal access to instruction tools and accountability assessments. Continue and increase opportunities for stakeholder input before and as decisions are made, not after, so that we knee-jerk response instead of being proactive. And as legislation is proposed and amended, and the new changes have been wonderful in that regard. I want to thank the commissioners, and Matt, you'll be glad you gave me the extra time because I wrote, and Matt Traverso, whom I believe needs to be cloned or his salary at least doubled, take him out for a drink, do something for this wonderful man. For the improvements in shared communication, in process, in format, with increased opportunities just as this, for organizational input. I think it's critical that we work together. We're all good people. We all have good hearts. We all care about these kids. And the opportunity for public input and increased parental input in working together with you commissioners on behalf of all our students, each and every one, the families and the educators of California. So thank you. Okay, appreciate it. Thanks.
Great. Sure. Thank you, Kelly.
You bet.
I definitely appreciate, it's not very often that we get to sit in a group for 2 days with just special educators. And so it's nice to come to Sacramento and see similar faces, and you guys are consistent and appreciate your engagement.
Heidi Holmblatt, California Association of School Psychologists.
Welcome.
Thank you. How's that?
Yeah, you can pull it. Yep.
I'm very short, so we'll have to.
That's all right.
This. Hi, I'm Heidi Holmblatt with the California Association of School Psychologists, and I just got your question, so I just wrote something down.
Great.
This year, we are hoping to start a goal of bringing back continuing education for PPS credential holders.
Nice.
Right now, we don't have to do anything, and it's beginning to show. Not even just beginning, it's been showing for several years. And so we are trying to figure out the best way to approach that with the CTC. And either through we know we're going to have to go through legislation for that. So that's one goal. The other goal is to have some clarification after 40 years on the Larry P. case and the assessment of African American students. Our members are still confused. over what they can and cannot do when it comes to that. We are waiting for guidance from CDE, which we know will be coming soon. And meanwhile, we are starting to put together a curriculum for our members, well, for school psychologists, on the best practices on assessing all students. Let's see, we also have an upcoming convention, November 8th through 10th in San Diego. If you're interested in going to that, it's at our website, casponline.org. And the theme this year is Investing in You equals Investing in Students. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Great, thank you, Holly. And you said the California Association of School Psychologists. Heidi, thank you. Sorry about that.
That's okay.
School psychologists, right? CASP. Thank you very much. Appreciate your coming and being flexible and answering the question as once you got here. So thank you.
Thank you.
Jennifer Takerts and Joyce Clark from FEDC, Family Empowerment and Disability Council.
Oh, great.
I'll be really short because I'm really just here to support Joyce. My name is Jennifer Takearts. I'm with the West Ed Center for Prevention and Early Intervention, and we are contracted by the California Department of Education, and Matt is our amazing contract monitor.
Nice.
We are contracted to provide support and technical assistance to the Family Empowerment and Disability Council. We do a variety of activities in support of their goals. So that's why you see me here. It's really to support whoever is attending on behalf of the FEDC and the great work that they do. So thank you for having me.
Great.
Thank you for having us here today. And I'm Joyce Clark, and I represent the Exceptional Family Resource Center, and we serve both San Diego and Imperial counties. And as Jennifer said, West Ed does provide the technical assistance for the Family Empowerment Disability Council. Some of that includes training and information, evaluation, capacity building activities, outcome-based evaluation procedures and processes, and coordination of local, state, and national system change advocacy efforts, which is one of my personal favorites. The FEDC goals for this year are we're going to be doing more training and receiving information on a variety of topics to increase the capacity of the individual FECs to participate more effectively and to share with families. One of the things that we hear from families is that they're not always in the know in terms of a lot of the systems level activities, and it's really important that they have access to that very same information, so when they're participating in their IEPs or transitioning processes, that they're well prepared and understand what those opportunities should and could look like, and also to have a voice to provide that feedback and to strengthen and empower them. Another goal for this year is to provide input to this body and other bodies on current trends. We're just in the process of initiating a way to collect more real type data, and each FEC will probably manage this individually. Also, to increase our visibility with statewide and national task force that are affecting the change, some of those activities that our directors and their staff participate on, our committees that are local partnership agreements from the department, from the California Blueprint. And this is a hugely important area that we hope to focus in a little bit more to make this meaningful and understandable for families and for students. Also, to continue our efforts to increase the funding to existing FECs and to expand the number of FECs. Currently, there are 14 statewide FECs, and as we all know here, there are a lot of students and a lot of parents, and so we're really underrepresented. The initial legislation from SB 511 was to expand to 32, and we had some momentum this year in legislation, and hopefully we'll be able to stay on track with that. I can tell you as a parent how important it is to make those connections and how validating it is to be able to build those networks for families and strengthen. We're also here to help families individually at our FECs to really participate more effectively in that IEP process. There are a lot of trainings on the law, the regulations, and those types of things, but it really is far more than just knowing the law and understanding it. We're really encouraging families to build those teams into how to participate on a team, how to communicate more effectively, so that those bumps along the road that are bound to happen can be addressed at the lowest level. Trying to think if there's anything else. Our role as FECs is to help families better understand the nature of their children's disability and their educational needs, participate in decision-making processes, and obtain an information. It is complex. I think our number one goal, I know in San Diego and Imperial County, is really what we help parents most with is navigating those systems, because I think, as Kristen pointed out earlier, that we have a number of students who engage in a number of social services, and parents are working, parents are challenged with so many things. So that is something, hopefully, that we'll be able to expand our services and build our capacity as well. I have to say, on a personal note, I'm really excited to hear about those objectives with capacity building and content areas. I have always been a strong advocate of looking at of making the system stronger. I think the barriers families face in these challenging times and teachers and service providers is really within the systems, and how to strengthen those processes so that everyone has more opportunity and things can be less stressful. Thank you.
Nice.
Does anyone have any questions?
Well, Joyce, and Jennifer, thank you both for being here. We definitely have appreciated the engagement of the FECs in the commission discussions. And, representing the voice of parents is a core value of the commission. And so definitely look forward to more engagement with you. We supported the legislation on expanding FECs that we discussed at our last meeting. So happy to continue those conversations. We know that the service you provide is much, much needed in the field. So thank you for being here, and we look forward to engaging with you more. Okay, Matt.
Heather DeFady, SELPA Administrators of California.
The SELPA, I'm here to represent this California Association of SELPA Administrators, and I will be your liaison again this year, along with our chair-elect, Susan Costin, who could not be here today. So this Special Education Local Plan Area Administrators of California is a statewide association of professional educators who collaborate with stakeholders to influence policy and practice on behalf of over 770,000 students with disabilities. The purpose of our association is to develop shared knowledge. Thought I got it low enough, sorry. To develop shared knowledge and expertise, advocate on behalf of the special education community in the state of California, and support access and positive outcomes for students with disabilities through compliance, monitoring, and consultation. And we do this through program planning and evaluation, fiscal planning, legislative analysis and education, review of legal issues, research and dissemination of information, as well as training and technical assistance in collaboration with other agencies. Our activities and focus for the upcoming year are continuing to advocate for adequate and equalized funding for special education, including funding for preschoolers, building members' knowledge in the area of improvement science to support the differentiated assistance work. We're updating the association's drafted annual budget plan, as we discussed yesterday, and providing input to CDE as they're developing the annual assurances plan template. So that is our focus for this year. Any questions?
Any questions for Heather?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Heather. We definitely appreciate having you here. Your information that you brought yesterday was invaluable, and love the partnership that I know that Director Wright mentioned earlier, and just the engagement of SELPA overall. So thanks for your leadership on that. All right, Matt. Okay. Joyce, come on down.
It's not supposed to be me. And I said to myself, oh, I don't really have to put in a card because they said just make a line. So I'm at the end of the line. It's supposed to be Nika Cox. She's our current president of the California Association of Resource Specialists and Special Education Teachers. And she had written some things, and I should say, apologize that she couldn't be here. All right, but most of you know who CARS is, but I'm going to read you from the website. CARS Plus is the only organization whose sole purpose is to represent the unique needs of the resource and special education teachers in California. The California Association of Resource Teachers was formed in 1981 as a nonprofit organization dedicated to the support and resource specialist programs. In February of 1996, the organization voted to expand its active membership to include all special education teachers, not just resource specialists. And there are national associations like CTC, CEEC. I mean, I could tell you all of them, but you already hopefully know most of them. California is the only state out of all 50 states that has a statewide special education association. No other state has one. In fact, we have members that are member of CARS that are from Hawaii, Idaho, Colorado, because their own states don't have an association. I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah.
The thing that Nika had developed and she wanted to share with you, again, I'm reading it because I don't want to mess up. Every president who's is elected for 2 years, and they make their own set of goals for their term as president, and these are Nika's. Our goals are to identify and investigate current issues in order to assist in the developing of policies as guidelines for action, to provide ongoing professional support to our members and special educators in California, to represent and protect the interest of the special education teachers, and proactive involvement in legislature and the CDE. And I would add, and you've all heard me say this for 6 years, the primary most important persons are the students that are identified with special education needs in California. We want to increase public awareness of special education programs that serve students with IEPs, and to keep California teachers informed and aware, to be an active voice when needed here. And we also pride ourselves, we pride ourselves in a high quality convention we sponsor in assisting others in creating a comprehensive toolkit for working with students with an IEP. All right. Again, Nika's a highly qualified person. We're very proud that she's our new president, and I apologize that she couldn't be here today. I have a feeling, because I live in Sacramento, even though last year I said, I'm retiring. I think I'm still going to be here a lot, but all know that CARS prides itself in being an active voice here at Commission and without politics. Then when you talk to me at lunch, I have my politics. All right. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Joyce?
All right. Again, thank you for all your hard work and what you do. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Joyce. I appreciate you being here consistently and participating. Really appreciate your input. And we look forward to seeing Nika too. Please let her know. Okay, other folks, Matt? Nope. Okay. All right. Commissioners, thank you for that. Partners out there in the audience, thank you again for being here. We look forward to this upcoming year. So we are now at lunch. We are still running a little bit early, so nice job. I know. Michelle, excellent. That's just my presence. Yeah. Okay, so we are going to shift 15 minutes early. So if we leave now, help me with the math, Matt. We'll come back at 1:15. Whew, that was quick. So we will break now for lunch. See you back here right at 1:15. Thanks, everyone. We are in the final stretch of our meeting. Thanks for allowing me to make some adjustments to the schedule. And Scott, since we are since we have adjusted the schedule, if folks are okay with that, I think we'll go ahead and hear from Scott Kerby, our state director of state special schools. And Scott, is it true that this is potentially the last meeting that we will have you as our
it's not a potential. Yeah, I've already signed. I'll be retiring after 39 years of service.
Wow.
Education. Next Thursday, the last day of the pay period, is my last day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
next Thursday.
Next
Wow.
Thursday, yeah. So yeah, it's exciting. Well, this past Monday, I woke up really excited, and I know many of you did too. But I don't know if it's for the same reason. But I woke up excited because it was the first day of school for the state special schools, and for the past 39 years, that first day is just continues to give me chills. And I remember when I was a principal, Summer, I couldn't sleep the night before that kids were arriving. And so this past Monday, I went to the California School for the Deaf Riverside and woke up early. Yeah, I was excited. Went to the California School for the Deaf Riverside, and I went out there to the bus stop, my favorite place to be, at 7:50 in the morning, and greeted students. They came off the bus, greeted parents as they dropped off their kids, and it just continues to be a thrill. 39 times I did that, and even though I will retire, I hope to take advantage of that opportunity again and again and again, even though I'm not employed. But it's exciting to see them come off that bus or get out of their parents' car with the brand new backpacks and brand new clothes that they went shopping for specifically for that first day. And the smiles and the excitement, and so it's heartwarming, and everyone should experience that. There's nothing like it in the world. Is the first day of school, getting out there and seeing those kids, and they actually jump off the bus and they actually run to the class. And that's not unique to the California School for the Deaf Riverside, but CSDR is a very, very special place, as is all my other schools. But I believe very, very strongly in the purpose of the state special schools and diagnostic centers within the spectrum of services we provide in the state of California. We are very unique in this state that we provide state special schools, and we provide the services of diagnostic centers. Right now, in the country, we have about 35 state special schools. That number is shrinking. This state continues to dedicate support for that financially, and both from the Department of Education. We are the only state that has diagnostic centers, and more about that in a minute. But I'm blessed that I've been doing this for 8 years now, and I was talking to Ann there in the back, my colleague from the Riverside County Office of Education. It's been a wonderful 8 years, and I'll miss it a lot. But I am compelled to retire, not because I'm done, but because I just had my first grandchild. And I have a more compelling reason to spend my time now than to be here. Hope that didn't sound bad. It did. As I said before, I'm very fortunate to serve as the Division Director for State Special Schools and Services. This division has been operating since 1944. We are older. We were the original, this division was the original special ed. We were special ed before there was special ed. So we started in 1944 with the diagnostic centers, and we had already had 2 state special schools in the state of California from 1860. We had the California School for the Deaf that was in San Francisco, and California School for the Blind, which was also in San Francisco. They were there only for a couple years. Then it burned down. Then they moved across the bay, California School for the Deaf in Berkeley, and California School for the Blind in Berkeley. Those two schools stayed there until 1980. They moved south a little bit to where they currently are in Fremont. California School for the Deaf Riverside started in 1953, again, well before IDEA of 1975, and we were delivering those special education services to exceptional individuals that were deaf, hard of hearing, blind, VI, and deaf-blind. So since 1860, we've had the state special schools. In 1944, as I mentioned before, we didn't have the diagnostic centers. They weren't diagnostic centers. They were also state special schools. They were also residential, and they were called developmental centers for the neurologically handicapped. And we had 3 of them, one in LA, one in Fresno, and also one in Berkeley. They were also 24/7 facilities, and I say 24/7, just like the state special schools. Kids only went home 4 times a year back then, and that was during the major holidays. And then budget cuts came, and we reduced that down to a 24/5 facility where we're at now. But the diagnostic centers were residential. And each diagnostic center had 60 individuals, exceptional individuals, that had a broad spectrum of abilities, not necessarily on the deaf, blind, VI, hard of hearing, or deafblind. Then in 1980, the role of the diagnostic center switched, or I should say developmental centers switched to a diagnostic center. No longer were they a residential facility, and no longer were they a state special school. They were a diagnostic center with 3 purposes. Number 1, to provide diagnostic services or assessment services for individuals that were quite challenging to LEAs who didn't have the resources to fully provide a comprehensive evaluation for some of those individuals. Number 2 is they provided intensive professional development, both at the facility and off the facility. And number 3, they do special projects to LEAs for different purposes. So they continue to provide that. And the diagnostic centers right now have grown and grown and grown. We continue to only have 3. Quite honestly, it is my dream that we really expand the diagnostic centers to more than 3. We really can, right now we have waiting lists for assessments, the referrals we get for assessments. Our PD programs are full. We have many requests for special projects. We continue to provide or facilitate PINT, Positive Environments, Network of Trainers. We do Captain for the Autism Project. We do many things that support special education services in this state. So yeah, we can expand. It's my dream not to have 3, but maybe double that to have 6, or triple that to have 9, and we would still be at capacity because of the demand that we have from our LEA colleagues and SELPA colleagues for our purpose, for our mission. State special schools, again, we have 3, California School for the Deaf, Fremont, and Riverside. Riverside serves the 12 counties of Southern California, all the way up to Inyomoto, and the California School for the Deaf serves the other 38 in Fremont, and California School for the Blind serves the whole state. Yeah, we provide transportation for students back and forth for a residential placement. Even those kids, it's quite often that I will fly back to my home in Riverside with many kids from California School for the Blind that are from and live in the Riverside area. It's a lot of fun. California, the state special schools has new leadership. In the past 2 years, I've been working aggressively to recruit and appoint new site superintendents at the 3 schools. And just recently, I appointed a new site superintendent at the California School for the Blind. And it was quite an intensive search. It was a 1-year search. And once again, I was very busy doing 2 duties, double duty. My role here as division director, and I also served as interim site superintendent at the California School for the Blind for the past year. But the good news is I recently appointed someone after a year-long search and many interviews. I appointed someone from within, from inside the school, and her name is Gina Willett. Gina was the director of student services there at the School for the Blind, and she did very, very well. Her experience, background, resume, passion, well deserved her that appointment at School for the Blind. So what's exciting right now for the state special schools is this new leadership. And I have worked hard with these 3 new site superintendents, both at Fremont, Riverside, and CSB, on refreshing the role of our service to individuals that are deaf, hard of hearing, blind, VI, or deaf-blind. And is exciting. And so that's kind of a hesitation on my part since I'll be retiring. I see this new evolution of this new era in state special schools, given the new leadership. And so it's quite exciting. So I see the state special schools moving quite up into a new chapter and delivery of services that we provide you and the LEAs and the SELPAs and the parents. Enrollment is up at all 3 schools. We continue to get, as I mentioned before, great support, outstanding support from across the street in the state legislature and from the Department of Education, all the way from Mr. Torlakson, state superintendent. It's an exciting time, but I am moving on. But as I mentioned before, when I was at the California School for the Deaf, Riverside on Monday, and in addition to me being at the bus drop-off area, I also met all the students, or I gave the keynote address to all students at a student assembly. And it was exciting for me because I've seen many of those students before when I was interim superintendent there, and I've seen them grow. And also out in the audience were many of the staff and faculty that I taught back in 1980, 81, 82, because I started my career 39 years ago at the California School for the Deaf in Riverside. So many of those kids are now staff and faculty. So I told the student body, and the student body consisted of all ages 3 to 21, and I said, this is your year. It's going to be an exciting, I guarantee it. I said, it's my promise that this will be your year. And then I gave them each a pencil, and I have each a pencil for you. That's my prop. So if you each take a pencil, and this is the same pencil that I gave to my students, or gave to the student body of the School for the Deaf Riverside. And as I held up the pencil, I told them there's 5 things that can drive you through your tenure this year at the California School for the Deaf Riverside, regardless of your age, and regardless of your boy, girl, tall, short, but I want you to do this. I want you to hold this firmly, but not too tight, because if you hold it too tight, it's gonna break. So be very gentle. And then I went on to discuss about the theme of our year at California School for the Deaf, and that is kindness. And so there is a theme that permeates the campus, that we're going to be kind. We're going to be kind in many ways. And same thing, how you hold your pencil. So be kind, hold it firmly but gentle, and don't let it break. Don't let yourself break. Don't let your friends break, but be there. And if you see something, do something, and that is hold it firmly but gently. Number 2 is that your pencil, you notice, is very sharp, and I want you to be very, very sharp as well. If you look at the tip of the pencil, it's sharp, and what happens when it gets dull? When you use a pencil, it becomes dull. And what do? We sharpen it because it makes our work sharper. And I want you to stay very, very sharp as well. And you may have to re-sharpen yourself every once in a while, and you can do it yourself, but sometimes a friend can sharpen you, okay? Number 3, if you turn your pencil around, we have a what? An eraser. You are responsible, and only you are responsible for correcting your mistakes, okay? Sometimes there are others that can help you through that, but depend on yourself to fix your mistakes and correct them. But if you need help, I'll be there. And I pointed to myself. I said, if you need help in correcting your mistakes, I'll be there. But if I'm not around, there's Mrs. So-and-so, Mr. So-and-so, and you're going, okay? Number 4, the most important part of the pencil and the most important part of you is what's inside. What's inside? Did you know that? Yeah. The most important part is what's inside, and the most important part of you is what's inside. And I want you to understand that one of those things is your heart. And the heart of a pencil is inside, and that's the core. That's the thing that makes the beauty of the paper. Without the pencil, without the heart, the paper is just paper. But when you put your heart on the paper, it becomes beautiful. Number 5, you must leave your mark this year. My charge to you is that you leave your mark and make sure your mark is positive and it's kind. And because each of you, and now I pointed to you, I pointed to the staff, I pointed to the kids, you each have a purpose here today, and you each have a purpose this year at the School for the Deaf Riverside, is that when you leave here next May 30th, that you're going to be a much better person than today. And you'll do that if you pay attention to your pencil. Thank you.
Well, Director Kerby, thank you for your time. I think in all the years that I've been a part of the commission, you have been here. You have brought us incredible insight into, well, you've shared your passion for School for the Deaf, School for the Blind. And the videos you've shared when you've brought students, those are definitely, if I think back on all of the visits folks have had, I think about the basketball team. Was it the basketball team? Football team. I think about just the mentors and the mentees that you have brought, and they've sat in the back and watched the group. And there's so many different aspects of the work that happens at those sites that you have shared with us here at the commission. And so thank you for that. Thank you for that. I mean, it is at the core of who you are, your passion for those programs. So we have a card for you with a little gift inside to help jumpstart your time with your is it granddaughter or grandson?
Grandson, and he is 10 weeks old today.
Oh.
Which as I was telling Ann earlier, the compelling reason for retirement is the grandson. And as I mentioned earlier as well, it's an exciting time for me to get that promotion. And the promotion is I will now be his nanny.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going from division director right about here to nanny. Yeah, it's a promotion.
Oh my God.
Pays about the same.
That is a lucky child. So, and we hope that you'll have some field trips up here during commission meetings. We'd love to meet him.
Thank you.
So, thank you. Okay, Matt, we are Right on track. No, we're a little bit off. I apologize for that. So we are at item number 14, and commissioners, as part of the orientation that we talked about yesterday, we are trying to make sure that folks have a solid understanding about how our procedures work, how our policies work, and just really appreciate Deputy General Counsel Paul Lacey welcoming you back. I know that you've been with us before, and to give us an overview of the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. And this is something that often stumps us, and we definitely appreciate the reminders and just the review of what, given the importance, the scope of our work, what are the guardrails or the parameters that we need to operate within. So appreciate you coming down to share this information with us.
All right, well, I'm going to follow Scott's lead and be very kind by being mercifully short. Because you have the home version of the program and it's spelled out in bullet points on the PowerPoint.
Nice.
We won't need to go in a lot of detail on most of it. There's a couple of areas I want to touch on in a little more depth, but it is important that I do an overview of the whole program as it's required by the law. So beginning with if you get your version up of the PowerPoint or look at the screen if you can see one from there. We'll go right to the first slide and just mention that the Bagley-Keene Act is an act of the legislature relative to the open meeting laws. And the essential purpose of it, as you can see here, is to make sure or ensure that the public's business is done openly, not behind closed doors and all that cigar smoke and such. So that's the purpose, and that's the kind of the policy that underlines the particular rules that we'll cover here in just a moment. If you've been in local government or even school district government, you're probably familiar with the Brown Act, and they're very similar, if not almost identical. So again, on page, I guess I better move up. On page 3 of the slide, we'll see the clear statement that the actions taken by state agencies be openly and their deliberations be conducted openly and before the public. The act itself applies to state bodies, and state bodies include advisory commissions and committees that are created by statute. And your commission is one of those state bodies, is created by statute, so of course you're subject to the act. Okay, so I'm not going to go into the rest of the definitions because all that matters is you're subject to the act. But I do encourage you to preview the slide itself. Now, one of the questions that comes up is, when has a meeting been convened for which the act applies? And the general rule is that anytime a quorum, which is the majority of your body, gets together to hear, discuss, or deliberate on any item within your subject matter jurisdiction, which I guess generally is the field of special education. And notice, and it's underlined, that's to hear, discuss, and deliberate. Sometimes we think about meetings as that we deliberate, make decisions, which may be in the form of advice and recommendations, which are decisions, but it does include actually hearing information or discussing information. So when a majority of you engage in that process, it's a meeting and it's subject to the act. I'll break that down just a little bit.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
So I have a question. And this may be premature, but we have operated under the definition of 3 commissioners or more constitutes a meeting. And so a quorum is a different number for us. And so that's new to me. And so I wonder if you could go back and share your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I'm not familiar with your bylaws. In the statute, a meeting is communications by a majority of your commission. Our presentation, which is taken directly from the presentation to the state board, is based on their bylaws, which limits it to 3 members or more. That may well be in your own bylaws. Yeah. And it's a good practice anyway, to be quite candid, and for reasons that we'll kind of get into on what constitutes a meeting, because we're going to get into serial communications and such that can create a meeting. So it may be in your bylaws, but
probably
technically
is,
under
yeah.
the statute, it's a quorum.
Okay, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, no, quite all right. Okay, and so I'm going to put my reading glasses on because now even the computer gets blurred at this stage of the game. Okay, so a meeting, again, we mentioned that even hearing a matter, so if you're briefed on a matter, any communications, and we're going to talk about serial communications in just a moment, that facilitate an agreement on a matter can constitute a meeting. Conversations in advance of a resolution can constitute a meeting. Virtually any aspect of the deliberative process, okay? Again, let's always connect each of these back to the general premise, which is that the public's business be done in the public. And that's kind of a helpful guideline to always fall back on. Okay, there were some recent amendments in 2010 that essentially cover kind of electronic and serial communications. And we're going to get to that in just a moment, but that's a 2010 amendment, so that slides in there. So let's jump right to that. Serial meeting. In the age of technology, we have to be very cognizant of that. In the old days, all you had to do was worry about if you were in the same room together, or perhaps maybe a telephone call. But any serial communications between you on an issue that falls within your subject matter may wind up constituting a meeting if it results in one communication going to another and to another. Again, the statute is a quorum, but your own bylaws, I'm not sure, we can look at those. But a good practice is you wouldn't want communications going through 3 people. And so the caution is if you text message or send emails or telephone calls or other such communications or posting on social media amongst each other, all of those are communications that can constitute a meeting if you're discussing any matter that's within your subject matter jurisdiction. So that's something to be aware of and to pay close attention to. And I'm going to cover in a moment, by the way, because you're probably going to have some questions about different types of gatherings and interaction with the public and that sort of thing, and what kind of cautions to keep in mind. But let me digress for a moment, as the sequence of the slides do, just to bring up telephonic meetings. I don't know if this commission ever does, but in any event, if there was ever an event in which one or more of you were to participate in a meeting telephonically or through the audio broadcast, et cetera, as some of our state advisory meetings, occasionally that happens. We have some internal committees that do that. Each phone or each location that a member is participating telephonically or through audio, first of all, it must be posted on the agenda as to the location. It must be open to the public, okay? And any roll calls must be oral so that it's stated out loud. So this would by nature eliminate calling in by cell phone or in your car. It's technically possible under the rules to do it at your house, but it would have to be open to the public for the entire duration of the meeting, even if you went elsewhere. Swimming pool and spa is probably not a good idea. Just showers out altogether. So you just have to keep in mind that remote appearances are open to the public. So I don't know if that ever happens here, but we are obligated to let you know. Okay. Something to keep in mind if somebody, because it does come up. We have other committees where there's something comes up, somebody really wants to be there. We are able to arrange that. Here it probably depends on both your bylaws and or staff. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth on meeting notices because your staff actually puts that out and they know what the rules are, and any questions they usually get a hold of us. But generally, as you're aware, all the notices are posted 10 days in advance. You get a copy of the information, the notices are posted to the public. Each item that you're going to hear or consider or deal with must be on the agenda. There must be a short synopsis indicating the nature of the item. Usually it's not more than 20 words, just enough to inform the public what you'll be talking about so that they can make a decision that if they want to show up and hear the item. You are required to allow the public to have, to speak on a matter, on each matter that you hear. And the public has the right to, of course, attend. You can ask them to sign in, but they're not required to, and they have the right to record the meetings. They also have the right to criticize you, hopefully politely. Okay. Moving right on the same topic matter, you cannot deliberate or go into issues that are not on the agenda. Difficulty there is that, again, the public is looking at the agenda. They might not be here because they don't think you're talking about something. You talk about something that's not on the agenda, and the public's been deprived of the right to actually be present. Okay. You can, at times, limit the amount of time that the public speaks on a matter. Sometimes the common sense is that it kind of depends on how many people are going to speak, and sometimes asking and kind of figure out how much time each person has. Okay. I'm not going to go into closed sessions much because that's very unlikely for the commission. They typically pertain to personnel matters and litigation. Usually more often involves either matters in which committees or commissions do deal with litigation, or it's more apropos to local government that's involved in personnel matters. But it's important to review the matters. They have to be noticed. Notes have to be taken, etc. We just went through the public's rights, okay, on your next slide. So there's those bullet points. Want to move right on and let you know violations are serious. One, it does affect the credibility of your commission, the work, and the state itself to not abide by Bagley-Keene, or to not, essentially to carry on the public's business, in the public forum. And that's very important. Technically, it is a misdemeanor not to comply. I don't know that that is something that comes up very often in the state. Sometimes we all kind of want to get away from the office every now and then, but I don't think the county Hilton is the place to do it. So it's probably best to kind of, use your best effort to comply with the rules. And any action taken by the commission, if it's not in compliance with Bagley-Keene, is essentially nulled. And of course, occasionally a third party could bring an action if it were to happen, and the state might wind up paying attorney fees, and it's usually not happy about that. Okay, I want to now the next slide is get into a few things that might want to pay more close attention to. Okay, we're talking about communications outside of a meeting. So here's where in the handout, and it is a good idea, is that communications between two of you is not an issue, but three or more is where the caution comes in. Okay, and that may be a matter of your bylaws, or it may be a matter even if it's not, and a quorum is more than three. Keep in mind what we talked about on serial meetings. And one of the things in serial meetings is not just electronic communications, but if one person speaks to another who then speaks to another who speaks to another on the same matter, suddenly you have a serial meeting and you might not even either realize it nor did you intend it, but simply speaking to somebody who then speaks to somebody on the same matter, suddenly a quorum has communicated. So to kind of talk to more than two people only increases the chance of that occurring, whereas two of you can be more cognizant about the idea, all right, we're not going to go around now repeat the same conversation to multiple different members. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, it's also, we're going to talk about this in just a little bit more detail. Of course, it's okay for each of you to communicate with the public, and I want to mention a few things about that in a moment. And of course, it's okay for each of you individually to communicate with staff, Kristen and Matt, and such, questions, clarification. Okay, we're going to mention in a moment though, but in case I forget, when you receive emails from staff, and you will, which will go out to all of you, one thing is important, a couple things are important. One is do not respond by hitting reply all, because then you're communicating with everybody. And I think typically there's a notice.
Yeah, we usually BCC the commissioners when I send out.
Okay, so it doesn't come back. Yeah. Wonderful, thinking ahead already. But the other thing too is don't start sending emails to each other commenting or discussing the email that you just got from staff. Because now, once again, you're back into the serial communications. Okay. Get caught up here. Okay, I think we just covered that one. In communicating with the public outside, a couple things that are probably, important is, one, the main thing is listen. Obviously, as members of a state commission, you're very interested in what the public and stakeholders think and have to say, okay? But some things to be cautious of if you're communicating, going beyond listening, is, to make it clear whether or not you're speaking for yourself or your own thoughts and ideas within the conversation, which is fine, and making it clear that you're not speaking for the whole commission. The only exception is if the commission has passed a resolution or a piece of advice, to communicate that and reflect this has what the commission has done is fine. But we suggest you be very clear that, you would clarify that the commission has taken a position. If it hasn't, it should essentially communicate your own thoughts and feelings. And it's important probably not to anticipate what you think you might do at a future meeting or what you think other commissioners would do. All of this, if nothing else, gives the perception to the public that somehow there is sort of closed door finagling behind the scenes as opposed to open deliberation in front of the public. So these can be very important. And given that you are likely, each of you are probably here because of your role in the community, and you're likely to communicate with stakeholders, you realize that these subtleties can have a huge reflection on your entire commission within the field and community that you're essentially representing. That's the end of the PowerPoint. I do want to let you know that in your handout, it's a two-part thing you have here. One is a several pages discussion from the Attorney General's office, kind of an official document. They give their advice on the Bagley-Keene. They explain some of these things in more detail. The things that probably will most come up to you are in the first 7 pages, and the first page counts the cover, so it's really 6 pages. It's not a lot. I highly encourage you to read at least those pages, certainly to go through other pages, but these are the things that would be most apropos. I want to draw your attention. We've covered all of these in general, some in a bit more detail, like serial meetings, but there's 2 points I want to bring up. On page 7, which is really about 3 papers into it, there's some discussion on contacts with the public, social gathering, conferences and retreats, and the teleconference meetings, which we talked about appearing outside. One of the things to be cautious of if you're in a social gathering, especially if, first of all, if there's more than one of you there, is to be cautious about sort of speaking to each other and communicating if you get beyond a couple of you, because it begins to create the appearance, if not the actuality, of a meeting. The second thing to be cautious of is when a member of the public or an interested community member is talking to you about an issue, is that if you get the sense or feeling that they're going from one commissioner to another to have this conversation, because then that person is beginning, especially if they start telling you what another commissioner has said or opined, or their communications with somebody else. And if you get the sense or feeling for any reason that the person is sort of engaging in sequential conversations, the public member is not barred from that, but at some point you have an obligation to realize that may be occurring and to sort of either explain or remove yourself in such a way that you don't accidentally become part of the sequential communication. Social gatherings, that's fine. Again, and this is an area, by the way, where that could happen. It might be a professional conference or a social gathering. You can encounter that with the public. You may all get together at a conference or social gathering. The important thing with social gatherings is not to discuss shop talk, the subject matter of your commission. In conferences, as long as they're open to the public, they're instructive and informative, and you're not communicating with each other, they're generally okay. There are some exceptions that are sort of fact specific. My suggestion is that if it looks like more than 2 of you are going to some sort of professional conference or gathering or training, you might want to communicate with staff, let them know kind of what that's about, and they're free, of course, to call on me if I can be helpful or somebody from our office. It's just a good idea. That way, if you're concerned or, about the nature of the conference, who will be there, we can give you some comfort level before you go. Okay, so I think the last point actually has to do with subcommittees. I don't know if you ever go through that process. Okay, you do. Subcommittees most often, or very often, are subject themselves to Bagley-Keene. So if the body creates a subcommittee of more than 2 people, and by the body it means either by a vote of the body, or if the body gives the chair the authority to appoint, or the chair appoints and the body approves, all those are different methods to create a subcommittee. If the subcommittee has any authority to act, to make a decision, or the subcommittee is going to return advice or recommendations to the full committee or commission, okay, is they're subject to Bagley-Keene. They must go through all the posting and all the open meeting rules. And the reason I say advice or recommendations is because giving advice or recommendations is an act of the state body. It's not just binding. So when you think in terms of your actions as providing state policy advice or recommendations, which are acts subject to Bagley-Keene, is if a subcommittee is giving advice or recommendation to the full commission, okay, is then they're actually taking that action, so they're subject to it. It typically doesn't apply if it's just informational. You send 2 or 3 people sort of gather some information, and they're not saying, well, 2 out of 3 of us suggest you do X, Y, and Z. Just provide information. It's typically okay. If you're not sure at any point, you can talk with staff who may want to talk with us. We can kind of get that straightened out. Or if you sent 3 people out, so, well, we're going to have a conference, you select the site. We'll vest you with the authority to choose that. Well, that's decision making. So that's kind of a last area that you might want to be cognizant of. So with that, I will let you on your own go ahead and peruse the AG's comments. At the end is the actual statutes, which the law requires you get a copy. Hang on to the PowerPoint. I'll take any questions, or if they come up during the course of your work, let staff know, and if they feel the need, they'll get a hold of us.
Well, thank you. Let me just start by opening it up and asking, are there any questions? Just for reference, what item, Barbara, what number is this, is the longer document under in our binders?
It is number 8.
Number 8. So commissioners, the longer document is in your binder for your reference. In both binders. Thank you, Matt.
PowerPoint and then also some more information.
All right, I looked up in the meeting binder.
Okay. Perfect. Any questions, commissioners? Okay, well, Paul, thank you for coming down again. I really appreciate it. Appreciate the information. And it does come up regularly. And I think, Matt and Kristen have definitely helped us structure our subcommittees and agendize those and make sure that we do those in a public way. But love the reminder and the opportunity to have you come back and ask questions if new issues arise. So thank you again for your time.
Always a pleasure. Take care. Bye now.
Bye-bye. All right. All right, commissioners, we are on item number 16. This is our general public comment. Matt, do we have any general public commenters today?
Yes, we do.
Fantastic.
Kelly Connell Sandler, California Teachers Association.
Good afternoon. This was what I spoke about this morning, that I'm hoping I have something that's helpful. One of the things that happens sometimes in teaching is that you're one of the people on the governor's panel that writes programs and credentials, et cetera. You move away with your husband to another state, you come back, and it's now invalid, and there was no way to prove that you were one of the people that actually helped put it in place, and you've been doing it for 30 years or so. And that happened to me multiple times when I moved from state to state. But one of the things that I want to say when you do the not invented here, NIH, if it didn't happen here, we don't listen, is that I learned to open my eyes and my heart to what other states had to offer. And a lot of times they were uniquely wonderful. When I taught in Maryland and lived in Maryland, anything that they wanted their teachers to learn, they brought University of Maryland professors to our local districts, and easier in Maryland because it's county-based. But even when it wasn't in other states, in particular Tennessee, where I went screaming, thinking you're not going to educate my daughters in Tennessee because I didn't know enough about how wonderful it could be. But that was free to us with professional credit, with movement on the salary schedule. And I was always at the top of, I had too many degrees, but then there was something called TIPS to improve professional performance as an incentive. But I just want to say that when you look at additional authorizations, you're asking an impacted area where we can't get teachers, where we're desperate for teachers, to do their job, take on additional coursework, and pay for it. And I will also say that it was an utter waste of money for my district, who graciously here in Pleasanton paid for our teachers to take the autism online course, because I was embarrassed at the spelling, grammatical errors, and outdated information. And they were not the only ones to feel that. Look it up, it was awful. And that went on throughout the state. So really, I'm going to talk to Tony Thurman because we're working closely with him and others, but please try and make it easy. And why wouldn't we pay our teachers and the gen ed teachers right along with us? We were in those classes together. In Maryland, they believe that every teacher, and I'm talking forever ago, my 40-year-old would enter kindergarten at 4, and that's when I was in Maryland. Okay, so just open to some thoughts about how to do this less painfully for everyone. I don't know who we can ask to come into SPED and put another thing on their plate without giving them some help, especially students with debt. Okay, thank you, that's it.
Thank you. Okay, great.
Joyce Childs, Cars Plus.
All right, so I have notes, and then I have something that somebody asked me to read to you. I'll do mine first. All right. There. Yes, okay. So the tours yesterday, those were magnificent. It was really cool to see people that, like I said, have been talking for years, or to see like Shiloh, who comes down here and she talks about, like Barb said, the division, and get up there and it's 3 people. I'm like, whoa, they do a lot of work. That was really good. I did ask a couple questions, and I was told very sharply that, oh no, questions will be taken and fielded and written down in one response from Kristen. But you know, Kristen, not one person made note of my question, so I don't know how you are going to get those questions and how you're going to give us feedback. Well, I don't remember.
I'm sorry if the message. I'm sorry if the message got jumbled, but I think the message was the only reason that we were saying no questions is because we were trying to get everyone through in 3 minutes. So one question and one answer, then they didn't have time to give their presentation. So it wasn't that we didn't want to answer questions. So
I realize that, but I had really good questions, and now
so all the
Matt,
questions.
I'm like, I don't remember.
If anyone had questions, just send them through Matt.
But I don't remember what they are now. You know what I mean? They were like in the moment.
Well, if they come to you again, please reach out and let us know. We're happy to answer.
I'll go for a walkabout upstairs one more time and with a notepad. Then I'll remember. Another thing is I've been listening these last 2 days to many excellent presentations, but one thing that has disappeared. I mean, I don't want to be negative, but it has disappeared. Is talk of the continuum. I heard, foster kids aren't going to be able to go to group homes anymore. I heard everybody's going to be in gen ed with support. The IDEA is a continuum, and for 2 days, nobody said anything about the continuum. So I'm bringing that up as a reminder. It's a continuum. Not everybody is going to be serviced the best in certain locales. I told Janie about the foster care thing, and she's like, dang, that's awful. She's in her 60s. She's retired. She goes, I had friends who lived in group homes, and they would have never made it. And I said, well, you live in a different state. Everybody my age just went to Haight-Ashbury, skip group homes. Do I have enough time to read this paragraph, Matt?
Still green.
Okay. This is from Janie, who is a special educator of 30 years. She's worked in hospitals, state mental hospitals, public school, resource, special day class. And she's our membership director. Some of you might have met her before. She said, please read this. I find the list of competencies, the new TPEs, overwhelming, and some are really unnecessary. As a resource teacher, I had exactly one student come to me with TBI in 21 years, and he came with a top-notch support group to help me help him. Of course, in my years as a state hospital teacher with a much more complex population, I dealt with many people with all kinds of brain injuries. I think it is much more important to have experts on call with low incident disabilities. For example, I never needed to provide adaptive PE. The one student I served with brittle bone disease had adaptive PE specialists come from the county once a week and eventually less often. They designed appropriate alternative activities for him. There is so much on the special educator's plate. We need to find ways to support things that are happening every day, not spend hours preparing them for low likelihood issues. I had a few other students with rare conditions, and when they came, I read up on them. I worked with their parents, their doctors, and the wonderful school nurses that are out successfully. There's no way a graduate program could have prepared me for everything I've seen in my 30 years. I see the red light blinking, and I say ditto. Making us go back to school is insanely ridiculous.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, any other public commenters, Matt? No? Okay. All right, we're moving on then. Appreciate the feedback, appreciate folks coming forward to share their thoughts. Thank you for that. We are now on our final item, item number 17. Commissioners, you've done well. You did good. You did good. So we captured quite a bit of information over the last couple of days that I know Matt takes diligent notes, probably already has a template for our next meeting, I'm guessing. So we had some suggestions for content that came out of both the policy and the ledge discussions. We had a couple of additional recommendations for upcoming agenda items that came from other items on the agenda. We also have an ongoing list of topics that folks have raised in previous meetings that we're slowly working through. But maybe we should start first, Matt, do you want to tell us the outcome of the survey so we can decide if it's appropriate to decide now, or I don't remember how many people have commented yet.
Sure. We have a total of 12 votes and right now 15 total commissioners. So if anyone here hasn't voted yet, you want me to read our results?
Yeah, why don't you tell us what the outcome is?
All right. So the leading right now with 6 votes is to keep the original 2-day meeting in October and then have the optional transition conference available. And the tie for second place, 3 votes for for 1 day in October, on October 26th, and have the transition conference be optional. And then 3 votes for the cancellation of the the ACSE meeting in October, and then hold a 1-day ACSE meeting in Anaheim at the conference on the 5th. And then we have 0 votes for the 8th. So.
Wow. Okay. So it does seem pretty clear that folks would prefer to continue to have a meeting here in October. I do know that we don't have Dr. Sandoval available, unfortunately, for those 2 days in October. And so then it's the 1 day or the 2 day, and either way, making the transition conference an option. So
I just, my thought is we can look at the agenda and what we
Yes.
have kind of, built out, and we can determine from there whether we want to have a 1 to 2 day meeting, as we always do.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
So-
always kind of,
That's a great point. So we don't have to decide that right now. Folks already have it on their calendars. We can get back to you soon, so you have time if you need to cancel or make a flight or a hotel change, you can do that. Can we send out, and you may have done this already, can we send out the transition conference registration?
sure, yeah, I will do that, yeah.
That would be great. And so folks, if you choose to do that, which again, you heard multiple comments today about the value of that, and I will definitely be there. It sounds like a number of folks will be there. Might be nice to not have a meeting while we are there, but to convene as a commission and coordinate who's going to what sessions, and so that we might bring back information to share when we come back together in Sacramento.
As long as we only coordinate. And
We
don't-
only coordinate
no
and
deliberation,
socialize.
discussion,
We can
or
socialize, right?
Socialization is fine.
Okay, perfect. All right, so with that, with the assumption that we will be having a meeting here in October, we'll let you know 1 day versus 2 day. Are there other agenda items that you want to make sure we add into the queue for what we will be discussing either in October or at a future meeting? Havania?
I'm confused with the language. Are you saying 1 day or 2 day here, or 1 day or 2 day in Anaheim?
1 day or 2 day, we'll let you know next week here. No meeting in Anaheim, just the option of going to the transition conference on your own in Anaheim.
So we are still up for debate whether we're going to have 2 day meeting here.
You got it. But not debating whether we're having a meeting. We will have a meeting in October 25th, 26th. We'll let you know based on content if it's 1 day or 2 day. All right, other questions or recommendations?
I believe, and I could be mistaken, that Mariano talked about bringing his daughter
He
as the
did.
student speaker in the October meeting here.
He did.
I believe he said that, so I wanted to make sure that that was on the agenda.
Yep.
Because we didn't have a student this time, and we've been trying to have students at every one of our meetings so I just wanted to make sure that didn't get lost in the shuffle.
Yep. No, Christina has agreed to come. Well, has the wedding dress been revealed already? It has, okay. Has the wedding happened?
Well, in real life, it's happened.
Yes, okay, okay. Oh, okay. Other suggestions? Okay, commissioners, you did great work. You can be proud. You represented well. Thank you for your work, your brains, your time. I know it's hard being the beginning of the school year, but this is important work, and just appreciate everyone that makes the time and stays engaged. I know there's lots going on in your lives outside of being here, but just appreciate you creating this space to loan us your brain for 2 days. And I do feel like we did great work together, and I'm eager for many of the conversations that we began to continue. So with that, safe travels, and you will be getting an email about October from us soon. All right. Perfect. Thanks, everyone.